Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 3:01. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories. The Prime Minister has accused the Labour leader of being on the side of the people smugglers as the pair went head-to-head in the Commons over the new illegal migration bill. Rishi Sunak defended the legislation which will remove those who enter the UK illegally and ban them from seeking asylum. Sir Keir Starmer cast doubt on the plans, saying attempts to tackle the number of channel crossings in the last decade have failed and numbers have gone up. He says the Conservatives have lost control of UK borders, but Mr Sunak denied that and accused the opposition of supporting unlimited asylum.
The honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
Mr Speaker, when I was in charge of prosecutions, I extradited countless rapists, and the conviction rate for people smuggling was twice what it is today. I voted against his legislation last time because I said it wouldn't work. Since it became law, the numbers have gone up. He's proved me right.
The reward for information about the shooting of a police officer in Northern Ireland last month has been increased to £150,000. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot up to 10 times at a sports centre in Omagh after coaching his children's football match. He remains in a critical but stable condition. Detective Chief Inspector Eamon Corrigan says he believes 2 Ford Fiestas were used in the attempted murder.
A second Ford Fiesta vehicle was used in the attempted murder of DCI Caldwell. It is also a blue Ford Fiesta of a similar model. The second car had the registration number RLZ 9805 and was bought in the Glengormley area of Belfast towards the end of January. I believe this car travelled to Belfast around this time.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex's daughter has been christened Princess Lilibet Diana at their home in Los Angeles. The couple's spokesperson says their children's titles of Prince and Princess will only be used in formal settings. Harry and Meghan say they don't want to deny their children their birthright, giving them the chance to decide if they'll use the titles when they're older. Buckingham Palace will update the royal website in due course to reflect the titles. Dozens of flights have been disrupted in the south of England as snow continues to fall across the country. It's after the coldest night of the year so far. The Met Office says temperatures dropped to minus 15.4 degrees in the Highlands. That's the lowest March temperature in more than a decade. National Highways is warning drivers in the West Midlands and the east of England not to travel unless their journey is essential. More sleet, snow and sub-zero temperatures are expected across all 4 UK nations until at least Friday. A weight loss jab is to become available for thousands of people living with obesity. The appetite suppressant Wegovy will be offered on prescription through the NHS in England. Previous studies found that those who received the drug as a weekly injection over 68 weeks saw their weight drop by 12%. Experts have described the treatment as a pivotal moment. And a working mother of 2 from Cambridgeshire has won over £800,000 on the Euro Millions. Sally Ann Hanich has been working 2 jobs and had no idea she'd actually won until a month after the draw. She's planning a dream trip to Japan, buying a new home and helping her kids get on the property ladder. The 55-year-old says she will keep her job at the council. You're up to date on GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, though. Now let's get back to Patrick.
A very good afternoon, everybody. Loads to get through, so let's get cracking. And we start with Harry and Meghan, who have begun to use the titles Prince and Princess for their children, Archie and Lilibet. People are accusing them of, frankly, a brass-faced cheat, because, of course, they've done their best, some would say, to run the royal family into the ground in the last few years. But the news came after it was revealed that Lilibet was baptised in California on Friday, and a spokesman for the Duke and Duchess of Warwick, Sussex, said, "I can confirm that Princess Lilibet Diana was christened on Friday, March the 3rd, by the Reverend John Taylor." Well, it's the first time Lilibet has been publicly referred to as Princess, and the children are still referred to as Master and Miss on the Buckingham Palace website. But the Palace said it will now be updated in due course to reflect the titles. But should they be giving their children the royal titles? They appear to massively dislike the royal family. Why would they want their children shackled to it? I'm joined now by our royal reporter, Cameron Walker. Cameron, they have been accused of massive hypocrisy here.
Well, they have. However, the letters patent from 1917, which sounds very technical, does state that any grandchild of the monarch who is direct line of the male line automatically has the rights to be prince and princess. So everyone asked the question following the Queen's death and Charles obviously coming to the throne, will Archie and Lilibet be prince or princess? And the answer from Buckingham Palace at the time was basically, we'll update as and when we get information. Well, as of today, it appears that Lilibet has been christened in Los Angeles on Friday and has been christened a princess, which seems to have put Buckingham Palace into a mode of reacting very quickly, and from my understanding is basically going to update the website in due course, is basically what they've said. Because at the moment, I'm looking at the website right now, it still lists Archie and Lilibet as number 6 and 7 on the line of succession, saying Master and Miss. But as it stands, Lilibet and Archie are both Prince and Princess.
Well, there we go. And Omid Scobie, the old mouthpiece for Harry and Meghan, has said that, well, William and Charles were invited to the christening but decided not to come. I imagine this will have caught them a bit by surprise, potentially, the christening. I mean, it is a bit of an odd one, considering they've been so desperate to criticise the royal family, haven't they?
Yeah, there's been a number of reports saying that the King, Queen Consort and Prince and Princess of Wales were invited but haven't attended. Kensington Palace, Buckingham Palace are not commenting on that point. But if it is true, it shows that Harry and Meghan seem to be wanting to extend some kind of olive branch to the royal family ahead of the coronation. But the cynic in me would also suggest that we know that negotiations, if you like, are going on whether or not they'd attend the coronation. Yeah. So perhaps this is an element of that, because we know they are in email correspondence with the palace.
Yeah, I just find it absolutely bonkers. And let me know what you think, ladies and gentlemen, that you could decide to call the royal family every name under the sun, criticise it as an institution, decide to make the Queen and indeed Prince Philip's lives miserable in their dotage, and then go on and decide that you want to name your daughter with a royal title. I just find that bizarre. How does that add up? Why would you want your daughter to be attached to something so toxic? But in other news, Harry might be due in court.
Well, due in court, but as in a civil case, Patrick, before you get any ideas, in a case against Mirror Group newspapers to do with alleged phone hacking. Basically, Prince Harry, a couple of months ago, along with a number of other very high-profile celebrities, including Elton John, Cheryl, the ex-Girls Aloud singer as well, are all bringing legal action against this particular newspaper group over what they are alleging is basically alleged phone hacking and getting stories by tapping their phones, something which Mirror Group newspapers has always denied. However, we are expecting a trial to start in May on that one, which is expected to last 6 to 7 weeks. What else is happening in May? The coronation. I suspect this trial will not start until after the coronation, but nonetheless, it's all going to be happening in the royal world around the same time.
Yes, indeed. I mean, there are a fair few big royal stories out today as well. One that we're going to be touching on a little bit later is Ngozi Fulani. Do you remember her off of the Lady Susan Hussey race row? Yes, well, we're going to be talking about that later on. She's bizarrely, I think, been named on the list of one of the most influential women in Britain at the moment, because it is, of course, International Women's Day, so happy International Women's Day to everybody watching. I also believe that you have a little bit of info for me about the Princess of Wales meeting troops. Is that right?
Yes.
You're very happy about that.
I am very happy about that. It's been a lot of bad news this morning.
Non-controversial royal story for you.
I know. So she's been out on the Salisbury Plain today. She is the new colonel of the Irish Guards. It's the first time she has met them. But instead of just stood there watching them parade down on a parade ground, she decided to get stuck in.
Gosh.
So she's been out in the snow, as you can see here.
You know, can I just say, there's going to be women all up and down Kensington High Street and the King's Road now wearing camo gear as a result of this. She is a fashion icon, isn't she?
She certainly is. I think many people would say you could put her in anything and she'll look good. But yes, she was out there doing training with the Irish Guards in first aid mainly, as well as drills as well. So yes, she was enjoying that, I think. But it makes a change to her just stood there watching, doesn't it? It's actually getting stuck in. A princess who wants to see exactly what the troops she is the colonel of does on a day-to-day basis.
Especially in the snow as well. She's picked a day for it, hasn't she? Look, Cameron, thank you very much as ever. Cameron Walker there, who's going to be a very busy man today, our royal reporter. I am joined now by royal commentator Michael Cole, who's, I think, going to get stuck into the latest round. Difficult to know where to start, or is it? No, the barefaced cheek, some would say, of Harry and Meghan. Why on earth would they want their daughter shackled to an institution that they appear to despise?
Patrick, allow me to say, first of all, I thought Kate looked terrific in her comeback here there. And I think you're right, it's going to set a new trend. Yeah, this is a fascinating story. Cameron has brilliantly outlined it. But what you've got here, essentially, is the Sussexes preempting things. I would normally have expected the King to formally bestow the titles of Prince and Princess on to Archie and Lilibet, as is their legal right under the letters patent of 1917. But they've actually gone ahead and had the child christened at a ceremony, not in a church, at their hilltop fortress at Montecito near Santa Barbara in California, with the Bishop John Taylor of Los Angeles presiding at an Anglican rite and Anglican service. They refer to him in the communication as the Archbishop of Los Angeles. Well, that's somebody quite different. He's a Roman Catholic Archbishop. And it's not clear from the communication whether they refer to her throughout as Princess Lilibet Diana. Well, I can't imagine that they've actually christened her the name Princess. I think that would be slightly irregular. But we imagine that she's been christened Lilibet Diana. Now, in the old days, in the Church of England, it had to be a proper name. I mean, the name Shirley was not allowed, so you had Shirley Ann and you had Shirley Jane.
Surely not, Michael.
Surely, absolutely. But in America, everything goes except not quite everything. In America, you are forbidden to name a child King or Queen or Santa Claus or even Adolf Hitler. But you can name them pretty well anything else except a trademark or a number or an emoji. So I'm not quite sure from reading that whether she's been named Princess Lilibet or she's been christened just Lilibet Diana. It is fascinating, but of course it does show that striking out by themselves. And the other interesting thing, we don't know quite who all the godparents are, but one of them we know to be Tyler Perry, who was the man who loaned them his house when they first went there. And it does say, according to the Anglican rite, and it was an Episcopalian bishop, that all the godparents have to be baptized. Well, shall we find out? Perhaps Mr. Omid, whatever his name is, will tell us in due course.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. I mean, there is even more mystery surrounding this, and potentially, I mean, who would have thought that Harry and Meghan could be guilty of factual errors ever? I mean, let alone this. They would just say that it was their truth, isn't it, that Tyler Perry is baptised even if he's not, and it will be their truth that this guy is an archbishop and not an actual bishop as well. So there we go. Michael, just quickly before we move on, this is a topic I'm going to be talking about a bit later on, but I want to tease our viewers with it now whilst I've got you, if that's all right, because Ngozi Fulani has come out and said that the royal family haven't done enough to protect her from a backlash after she basically stitched Lady Susan Hussey up and called her a racist and all of this. And then, may I add, went on a procession of different national television shows saying it all. She's now stepped down as the CEO of Sister Space, that charity which itself has come under rather a lot of scrutiny, possibly rightly so. We'll have to wait and see about all of that. But what do you make of this? We thought that was done and dusted, but it's not done and dusted. She's still banging on about how the royal family let her down.
You've brilliantly covered this whole sad saga from its very beginning until today. And as you know, and I've said it before, my fealty, my sympathy is very much with Lady Susan Hussey, who I knew over many years, and there could never be anybody less racist than Lady Susan Hussey. For her to be dragged into this in this way, in a very unfair way, in a very partial way, without giving her adequately a sense of being able to answer those allegations at the time. Now, what was all the apology about? When you have tea with somebody and they apologise and you accept the apology, that all ought to be the end of it. It's a very sad affair. I don't think it reflects very well on this woman, and I think my sympathies are very much with Lady Susan.
Yeah, indeed. And, you know, despite trying to run a bus over Lady Susan Hussey in the first instance, now I think many people might be sceptical as to the exact reasons why she stepped down from her role as a charity boss. And I suspect it is not to do with the backlash, which she, again, has now raised today, hasn't she? But there we go. Look, Michael, thank you very, very much. The wonderful royal commentator, Michael Cole. So, yes, lots of royal news to get stuck into. No doubt you will have strong views about Harry and Meghan and their daughter now being named Princess Lily. But do you think that's a bit hypocritical from the Sussexes? Also, yes, Ngozi Fulani. Happy International Women's Day, everybody. Did you know that Ngozi Fulani is now supposedly one of the most inspirational women? That's according to a list of most influential women. Also on that list, by the way, was a man. So, you know, swings and roundabouts. Moving on, though. Strong words from the Prime Minister in Parliament today. Rishi Sunak accused Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer of being on the side of people smugglers as the two went head-to-head at PMQs. It was over the government's proposed law to try and stop small boats arriving into the UK, and the Labour leader cast doubt on the illegal immigration plan, saying attempts to tackle the number of channel crossings have failed and numbers have gone up. He went on to say the Conservatives have lost control of UK borders, which Mr Sunak denied, accusing the opposition of supporting unlimited asylum. It is a little bit, isn't it, when you're dealing with those two people arguing over immigration like two bald men arguing over a comb. But hitting back at Labour, the Prime Minister said the party was on the side of people smugglers and Starmer was just another lefty lawyer with no plan to tackle illegal immigration.
The Prime Minister says they will detain people who aren't eligible to claim asylum here and then return them. Well, they already tried that under the last legislation. Last year, 18,000 people were deemed ineligible to apply for asylum. That's the easy bit, the talk. But as for the action, Prime Minister, how many of them have actually been returned?
Actually, when I was in Dover yesterday talking to our law enforcement officials, what did they tell me? Precisely because of the law that the Conservative government passed last year, they have now been able to arrest more than double the number of people they did before. 397 in the last 6 months. But stopping the boats, Mr. Speaker, stopping the boats is not just my priority, it is the people's priority. But his position on this is clear. He wanted to, in his words, scrap the Rwanda deal. He voted against measures to deport foreign criminals, Mr. Speaker, and he even argued against deportation flights. Well, and we know why, because on this matter, he talked about his legal background. He's just another lefty lawyer standing in our way.
Oh, there's a lot of mudslinging going on in the House of Commons, isn't it? Yes, a very serious political building steeped in history or actually just theatre. Anyway, let's cross live now to GBNews' political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is at Westminster. So, Keir Starmer accused of being just another lefty lawyer who's on the side of people smugglers. Darren.
Yeah, indeed, and he had back at those remarks, Patrick, suggesting that he had actually deported many foreign criminals at his time as Director of Public Prosecutions, and that the situation had clearly got worse in recent years under the Conservative Party. But you're right in saying any sense that these two top politicians would be a little more civilised towards each other than we'd seen in the past, particularly between Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson. Well, that wasn't on show today, tearing chunks out of each other on this issue of immigration. Clearly, Labour want to prove that this is not an issue they're going to shy away from. It is an issue they would say they want to tackle by primarily tackling those gangs, and the government's plan in the end isn't going to work. As for the Prime Minister, he's perfectly willing to have this fight because he feels that Labour really doesn't have a plan and that the public are on side. I think the big problems, though, for the Prime Minister are, first of all, there's a lot of hurdles to get over before this plan even gets in place. Then when it does, Patrick, let's be honest about this, it's not entirely clear whether it's genuinely going to work, whether this really will deter pretty desperate people from making those channel crossings. And then thirdly, what if the plan doesn't work at all? I mean, the Prime Minister has set himself up behind a podium saying stop the boats. It is entirely possible that those boats will still come, and at that point, do the Conservative Party really argue that the plan, or that there are future plans to tackle all of this? Though in saying it, you know what, they really do want to have this battle with Labour. They do feel that public opinion is on the side of getting tougher. They do think that this is a soft spot for the Labour Party, and that could be a strategy, frankly, that does work, particularly if the bill gets held up here in Parliament by the House of Lords, or indeed by lawyers. But in the end, if at the next election the Prime Minister can prove that there are fewer migrants making that crossings and they're dealing with the backlog, I'm not entirely sure the public will be terribly forgiving.
Well, no, exactly. Look, Darren, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor, who, bless him, has been out in the snow and then now the rain outside Westminster, so tough day to be out and about. But look, there is more to this migration story than meets the eye, because BBC's Gary Lineker has got involved. Now, supposedly, the BBC is trying to have strong words with Gary Lineker about a tweet where he likened the government's immigration policy to something that the Nazis would have done, which, as a rule, I think almost never bring up the Nazis. It doesn't tend to end particularly well. Supposedly, they can't get through to good old Gary. He's not listening, he's not deleting his tweet, and in fact, if anything, he is doubling down. I want to know whether or not you think Gary Lineker should be sacked. I will be speaking to a rabbi about whether or not what Gary Lineker actually said was offensive to the Jewish community. I'm Patrick Christys, this is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. In just a few minutes, I will find out whether scientists have finally found a cure for my love handles and man boobs. But now, as promised, the BBC presenter Gary Lineker, who's been heavily criticised for comparing the Tories' plans to tackle the migrant crisis to Nazi Germany. Now, Lineker responded to a video from Suella Braverman where she outlined the government's illegal migrant bill by saying it was beyond awful. When he was pulled up on his comment, Lineker replied, "There is no huge influx. We take far fewer refugees than other major European countries. This is just an immeasurably cruel policy directed at the most vulnerable people in language that is not dissimilar," and here we go, "to that used by Germany in the 30s. And I'm out of order, question mark. Well, yes, Gary, you are a bit, really, because a source says that BBC bosses are having a frank conversation with Lineker, who just a few months ago was found to have breached BBC impartiality rules following a comment he made about the Conservatives. The latest line, anyway, that's doing the rounds at the minute is that Gary Lineker isn't answering his phone to the BBC and is refusing to delete the tweet. So there we go. He is the BBC's best paid presenter, and it was revealed last July that he was on £1.35 million a year. The BBC often is accused of not being particularly impartial. We, of course, as the British taxpayer, do help contribute towards Gary Lineker's wages. I went and asked the great British public to find out if Lineker should keep his position after his comments. Here's what some of them had to say to me. Do you think that Gary Lineker on the BBC should be allowed to express political views?
No, not really.
Why not? Why not?
Because he's sports only.
In my opinion, he was right.
You think he was right?
Yes, I think he was right.
I
think the immigration policy is horrible, and I think we're less of a country by supporting something like this.
That's obviously fair enough, completely.
Yeah.
The question mark is over whether or not Gary Lineker as a BBC employee should be...
Doesn't bother me. I think people should say their opinions more, and I'm sick of people not saying what they really think.
Views on it, pretty much where the BBC stand with it. You know, like, I don't think he should be doing what he's doing. Yeah, he should be sacked.
Well, there you go, a mixed bag there. But with me now is Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Romain, and thank you very much for joining us. Now, I think something that's potentially been lost in all of this is actually whether or not what Gary Lineker said was quite offensive to the Jewish community, and I just wanted your take on that. Do you find what Gary Lineker said, comparing what's going on in terms of the government's response to the channel to, well, essentially the Holocaust, really, whether or not that is quite offensive and it demeans or devalues what went on there?
Yes, I do, although I would have to add that I think he does have the right to speak out, as long as it's not on Match of the Day. And also he has the right to criticise the government if he thinks, whether it's this government or any future one. However, I think the language that he himself used was misplaced. Because I think I'm speaking not just for the Jewish community, but anyone who's been a veteran or has got a parent or grandparent who was a veteran, in that the Nazis were involved in mass genocide. Now, you may dislike the current government's policy, but it isn't mass genocide. And what he's done is two mistakes. Firstly, he's missed the target, therefore, and he's overplayed the criticism. And people will say, well, this is the wrong analogy, and therefore they'll dismiss his argument. And secondly, I think it also demeans the unique horror of the Nazis. Because every time you say, oh, this person or that person or this policy or that policy is like the Nazis, it sort of, it brings it down. Whereas the Nazis were really quite unique and horrific. So he has this right to speak, but I think he chose the wrong analogy, and he needs to rethink which analogy he uses next time.
What should happen to Gary Lineker now, do you think, then?
Well, he's a great presenter. It's one of the few television programmes I watch every week, Match of the Day. It's essential viewing, and he also does it very well. So providing he doesn't introduce political or other comments in a football programme, I see no reason why he can't speak outside of his allotted airspace, just in the same way that you are perfectly entitled to say what you want once you're off the GB News studio.
Well, I'm quite entitled to say what I like when I'm in it, actually, as well. But that is a key point of difference, really, between the BBC and GB News. And I think that's one of the reasons why people do like us. But when it comes to the BBC, they do have strict rules and regs about what employees can say. They have impartiality guidelines. And yet again, it would appear that Gary Lineker has breached those impartiality guidelines. And in doing so, potentially actually devalued the true horrors of Hitler and Nazi Germany. I mean, that is quite a whopper, is it not?
Well, it is, but again, I think I thought the GB News stood for freedom of speech, and therefore, why are we denying it to Gary Lineker? Now, whether I agree with him or disagree with him is another matter, but I do think that once he's outside of the BBC studio, once he's outside Broadcasting House, he has a right to say what he says. That's fine by me. I just think he actually got the wrong analogy and he compared the Conservatives to the Nazis, or sort of implied that there was a similarity, which I think is wide of the mark.
Yeah, indeed. And I absolutely get what you're talking about. I mean, yeah, bang up for freedom of speech, no question about that whatsoever. I think there is obviously, like I've said, that question mark over BBC impartiality, which is something that no doubt Gary Lineker is going to have to find out about one way or the other, and the BBC are going to have to make a decision based on that. Whatever decision they come to, we will no doubt report on. But just a slightly more general question, not just about Gary Lineker, but there appears to be a lot of analogies that involve Hitler and Nazi Germany, etc. And are you, frankly, a little bit sick of that? Because it does appear, I think, to maybe, what would you say, I suppose dilute maybe the uniqueness of what went on there and the horrors that the Jewish community faced when it's wheeled out left, right and centre as an analogy.
Yes, I think that's a good word, dilute. And you often hear other people, political commentators or politicians even, or just people on social media, accusing the person they don't like of being like Hitler. And it's almost like a stick to beat them. But if you constantly use it and you don't use it in an extreme circumstances, and that is what Hitler and the Nazis were, extraordinarily extreme, which is why we went to war, for 6 years and engaged in a world war to fight an evil that was beyond anything that we'd come across before. Then if you demean it by constantly using it, then you're doing a disservice to that terrible period.
Look, thank you very much. Really appreciate your insight. Really appreciate you coming on. That is Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Romaine. Now, Gary Lineker has actually been, predictably, very active on Twitter today, and he's hit back at his critics. He tweeted, "Great to see freedom of speech champions out in force this morning, demanding silence from those with whom they disagree." Yes, OK, fair enough. So that is Gary Lineker's latest view on that. Again, just to bring you up to date, the reports are that the BBC has not been able to contact Gary Lineker yet. These are just according to reports that have just dropped at the moment. We'll bring you up to date on that as and when we get any info whatsoever. Of course, the impartiality guidelines at the BBC are there. Whether or not they should be is another matter for opinion, but I wonder what the British taxpayer will think about the fact that somebody who they pay quite a lot of money to every single year is comparing a government policy to try to stop illegal immigration in the Channel with something that the Nazis would have done. It's strong stuff. Anyway, there's lots more to come now between this time and 4 o'clock. Find out why Ngozi Fulani has got more harsh words for Buckingham Palace. It will not stop. And could scientists have found a cure for fatness? Yes, you always feel very sorry for those people who get caught up in fat people shots on television, don't you? But there we go. There's a few of them. But first, yes, it's time for your latest headlines now with Bethany Elsey.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 3:34. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has accused the Labour leader of being on the side of the people smugglers as the pair went head-to-head in the Commons over the new illegal migration bill. Rishi Sunak has defended new legislation which will remove those who enter the UK illegally and ban them from seeking asylum. But Sir Keir Starmer says the Conservatives have lost control of UK borders.
The honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr. Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
Mr. Speaker, when I was in charge of prosecutions, I extradited countless rapists, and the conviction rate for people smuggling was twice what it is today. I voted against his legislation last time because I said it wouldn't work. Since it became law, the numbers have gone up. He's proved me right.
The Duke of Sussex will be at the centre of a High Court trial against Mirror Group newspapers over phone hacking allegations. He's one of several high-profile celebrities bringing action against the publisher. The tabloid newspaper is contesting the claims, arguing that some have been brought too late. The trial will begin on the 9th of May and last around 7 weeks. The reward for information about the shooting of a police officer in Northern Ireland last month has been increased to £150,000. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot up to 10 times at a sports centre in Omagh after coaching his children's football match. He remains in a critical but stable condition. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now let's get back to Patrick.
OK, welcome back, everybody. gbviews@gbnews.uk is that email address. I've been asking you to get in touch loads about Gary Lineker, but we're going to read out some emails now about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex christening their daughter and using the royal title of Princess Lilibet for the first time. These two are the worst, says Jacqueline, I believe. Being royal has apparently ruined Harry's life, but now he wants his child to go through the same thing. Another money-making scheme, I think. Yeah, I wonder if they're trying to market their own daughter, because if you have just joined us, yes, that is the news that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have decided to christen Lilibet Princess Lilibet Diana, which for a couple who appear to want to trash the royal family non-stop and accuse it of racism, etc., why on earth would you want your own daughter shackled to that horrific institution? But Betty says, I'm so angry about the royal title being used for Harry and Meghan's kids. The titles are not a family thing, they are a royal thing. They need to be cut back, and only for those who are working royals. John's got one more for us here, and then we'll move on. Can anyone actually be christened as a princess? Surely princess is a title and not a name, therefore not something to include in a christening. Would Lilibet even be recognised as a princess? Well, it's funny you should say that, John, actually, because there are even serious question marks over the person who did the christening. Apparently, Harry and Meghan called him an archbishop when he's just a bishop, and that means something, so there we go. But look, moving on, Ngozi Fulani, remember her? Well, she's back in the news today, and I'm going to tell you, believe it or not, why, firstly, she's on a list of the most inspirational women in Britain on International Women's Day. By the way, also on that list was someone who's a man, so that's apparently where we are as a society now. But she's also been back criticising Buckingham Palace. I mean, for goodness sake, she threw Lady Susan Hussey under the bus, said that there'd been a racism allegation there, and there's a bit of public backlash, and now find out what she's criticising the palace about this time. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Right, hello, welcome back everybody. Now, Ngozi Fulani, the woman who said she was a victim of institutional racism from one of the late Queen's ladies in waiting, is back in the news today for a couple of reasons, actually. Fulani says that she's temporarily resigned as chief executive of Sister Space, the charity she founded, as she criticised Buckingham Palace for not tackling the abuse she suffered in the wake of the incident. Fulani was asked where she really came from by Lady Susan Hussey at a Buckingham Palace reception in November. Lady Hussey resigned a few days later. Buckingham Palace said last night they were deeply sorry for the incident and apologised for the distress and difficulty it caused to Miss Fulani. But this is what she said this morning.
Who are they apologising to? If you're sorry, tell me you're sorry. If you're not, it speaks for itself.
I think there's a number of things wrong with that statement, if I'm honest. I think the agreements that they've proposed that they've met or honoured are not the agreements that we set out with them. And I think if you're able to make a statement in the middle of the night to the public, why can't you give the apology that you just gave?
Yeah, I don't see what is so hard to say, I'm sorry. You sent me an invitation, so you know how to find me, you know how to say sorry. If you're sorry, then say sorry. If you're not, I get it. But when you make this apology to everybody, I don't know who you're apologising to.
I am very confused about all of this because she went and had a meeting. By the way, that's Marlene Headley there, otherwise known as Ngozi Fulani. And she went and had a meeting with Lady Susan Hussey. And anyway, with me now to pick through this particular incident is GBNews' royal correspondent, back for more. It's Cameron Walker. Cameron, I am very confused about this. I don't understand what's going on. I thought they cleared it all up.
Yeah, well, so did we. And then this morning, another programme on a different channel has Ngozi Fulani on as a guest. And as you heard her say there, she feels like Buckingham Palace or those within Buckingham Palace have not made a proper apology to her. Now, from speaking to Buckingham Palace this morning, a spokesperson said who was giving this right of reply to ITV following this interview. At the conclusion of the meeting in December with Lady Susan Hussey...
I'm just quoting now, Cameron, sorry about this. Just quoting now. Lady Susan Hussey and Ngozi Fulani have meeting, quotes, filled with warmth and understanding.
Yes, so this was following the instance at the reception where Ngozi Fulani publicly claimed that Lady Susan repeatedly asked her where she came from, which caused... let's be frank, a bit of a royal race row. Yeah. Then Buckingham Palace in December organised this meeting between Lady Susan and Ngozi Fulani, which they described as full of warmth and understanding. Now, a Buckingham Palace spokesperson said last night, or this morning, however way you want to put it, that apologies at that meeting were accepted and it was recognised that there was no malice had been intended by Lady Susan. A number of other pledges were made by the palace which have been honoured, including diversity and inclusivity programmes. And, this is the crucial bit, it was also agreed that no further media comments would be made, supposedly from either side.
Can I also just say that some of the questions that were allegedly put to Marlene Headley when she went and met Lady Susan Hussey were things like, what part of Africa do you come from? And we just saw on a clip there from a TV appearance this morning, she appeared to me anyway to be wearing earrings with the map of Africa on, which might make you wonder why that question was particularly controversial, given the context of what she may or may not have been wearing at that particular moment in time. I think people might be thinking that's quite bizarre. But yes, what now then? What's the latest here? I mean, are the palace going to comment back on this or what?
Well, Ngozi Fulani said during that interview that she is having to temporarily step down as the CEO of Sister Space, which is the charity she runs, which supports women who have been caught up in domestic violence. The reason she says she's stepping down is due to the fact that people cannot access the services due to the relentless, and I quote, abuse that Ngozi Fulani has received, both on social media and threats. Now, she claims that Buckingham Palace have not helped with any of that side of things in terms of the social media abuse and the threats of violence. But from my understanding, from speaking to my sources, Buckingham Palace have very much reached out and tried to help in that matter. And from my understanding, they haven't received, since that meeting in December, any further contact from Miss Fulani in response to them reaching out. So I'm afraid it's a bit of a game of he said, she said.
Well, exactly, and it's a bit ridiculous because it is also, as no doubt Marlene Headley was loath to actually reveal on national television, the stories that we're doing the rounds about just questions as to where all of the funding for Sister Space had come from and where some of that money was indeed spent, and questions that we'll have to wait and see what the answer to them is. But yes, I think this will probably enrage people, won't it, really, to see that now Marlene Headley and Ngozi Fulani is still criticising the royal family.
And unfortunately, it's also overshadowed yet another engagement which the Queen Consort is taking part in today at Buckingham Palace, a reception celebrating International Women's Day, just as this particular reception was marking those who've been suffering with abuse from domestic violence when that first initial meeting happened with Ngozi Fulani at the reception, where she was asked where she really came from. That was a Queen Consort reception, overshadowed by that royal race row. Then today, the Queen Consort's International Women's Day reception has arguably been overshadowed by Ngozi Fulani going onto a television programme this morning.
Yes, indeed. And it is, by the way, International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day, everybody out there. And that list did include, when it comes to people who've been the most influential women of the year, these do include, apparently, Ngozi Fulani. So there we go. Welcome to that particular world. It does also include, as well, an individual who was a comedian who was born a man who played the piano with his private parts on a Channel 4 show. So that's some of the most influential women there of 2023. Cameron Walker, thank you very, very much. Cameron Walker there, art royal correspondent, who I think one day we will have him on just to talk about nice, normal royal news, about them visiting an art gallery or something, and he doesn't have to wade through these waters. Thank you there, Cameron. You're doing a stellar job. Now, moving on. The race to become the new SNP leader got very nasty last night, and you hate to see it. The three candidates took part in a televised debate. Kate Forbes criticised Humza Yousaf's record as Transport Minister, Justice Minister and Health Minister. Meanwhile, Ash Regan said that the party had lost its way. Well, let's talk now to Michael Simmons, who is the data journalist at The Spectator. Michael, thank you very much. It is becoming increasingly obvious why the SNP didn't want any member of the public to view any of their hustings, because it is now ripping itself apart, is it not?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. After a kind of long day at the office yesterday, I got home and the debate was quite a late starter. It was starting at 9 o'clock and I thought, oh, I can't really be bothered watching this. I want to go to bed. But in fact, they was full of energy because the three candidates were just ripping lumps out of each other, ripping their own government's record apart, all in front of the cameras for the whole of Scotland to see. So the race is really heating up.
Yes, indeed. So, well, look, what are some of the criticisms that are being levelled at them? Because Nicola Sturgeon did manage to, some would argue, slightly like a dictator, managed to keep the party under strong lock and key, didn't she? And that now is, of course, not the case. And so what we're seeing is them criticising each other for a variety of different things. We have had previously, haven't we, the old gay marriage stuff, where Kate Forbes said that as a evangelical fundamentalist Christian, she would have voted against it. Humza Yousaf, who quite notably actually missed that vote, saying that he wouldn't have let his religion get in the way of politics, despite missing that vote. What are some of the other criticisms that they're lobbing at each other?
So what's really interesting about the format of this debate is the candidates got to cross-examine each other as well as the presenter. So what's essentially happened now is that we've got Humza Yousaf, who's very much the continuity candidate. He was defending the record of Sturgeon's government and the SNP government, which he's very much a part of. But then you had Kate Forbes, who's also been a member of that government, basically ripping it apart, saying that it would just be mediocre if things went on and that she was going to be the change candidate. So they've moved on from the kind of social issues to, one, the issue of how they'll deliver independence, but also the record of their own government.
Yeah, indeed, and this presumably will make quite bad reading for any backroom staff member of the SNP, because what they're going to have to try and do now is criticise each other and say what they would do differently, which, given the fact that the SNP have been in power for such a long time, does mean criticising the SNP, does it not?
Well, absolutely. And people in the SNP are apoplectic this morning, because the one thing that everyone credits the SNP for is their just discipline until now has been incredible. I mean, you do not hear really, until this gender bill came up, you didn't hear SNP politicians arguing with each other. But now they're ripping lumps out of each other. And just before we came on air, we had another Cabinet Minister, Shona Robinson, saying she would struggle to serve in Kate Forbes' government and that she doesn't think that she should be attacking her own party. So this has kind of really put a spanner in the works for the party.
Yes, indeed. Look, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. That's Michael Simmons. Oh, actually, just before I leave you, actually, it's probably worth noting who is actually currently the front runner to be the next leader of the SNP, the next Scottish First Minister.
So it's still Humza Yousaf, but there's still about a third of voters are undecided, so it's all to play for.
Oh, it's a game on, people. Game on. All right, thank you very much. Michael Simmons there, data journalist at The Spectator. Now, could a new wonder drug be the answer to all of our fat loss problems? It's called Wegovy, apparently, and it's to be offered to tens of thousands of obese people in NHS England, and it works by suppressing our appetite, leading to reduced hunger and calorie intake. So, bearing in mind as well, as just now be honest about this, I've had 2 McDonald's in 2 days, and for lunch I had fried chicken. So, is this the wonder drug that so many people like me and, those around me have prayed for? With me now is Emma Burnell, who is a journalist and political consultant. Emma, thank you very much. What do you make of this development? It has courted rather a lot of controversy, this.
I think it's a good development. It's a good move forward for people who might need support. What it's not, I think, is a miracle cure. There are plenty of things that need to be done. As I understand it, this drug will only be administered for 2 years at most. And after that time, your appetite is no longer suppressed. If you haven't done quite a lot of work in those 2 years, so I was somebody who had gastric surgery. I've lost half my body weight. I know other people who've had exactly the same surgery I did, but they didn't take to it. They didn't take the sort of head start that you get. So I think one of the controversies is that it may only work for a really short period of time. So there has to be a lot of support work, a lot of mental health work, a lot of diet and exercise work done in that period to make sure that people are really making the most of this window of opportunity.
Do you not think that this might end up having the opposite effect, which is instead of people going out and just getting healthier by deliberately eating healthier or exercising, that they'll just think, well, I can just take an injection and I'll be skinny?
No, I honestly don't. It's when you get to the levels of really high obesity, it's just such a hard thing to break. It really is. And I promise you, you are desperate to break it and desperately, desperately sad that you're not doing so. There's so much that needs to be done mentally as well as physically. When I was 26 stone, I couldn't walk 100 metres without being in crippling agony. The idea that I'd suddenly introduce an exercise regime into my life was just not possible. So it was only by being given the head start that I got that I managed to adopt healthy eating practices and to make sure that I walk everywhere. As you know, when I do come into the studio with you, Patrick, I always insist on getting public transport so that I can do the walk to the tube each way. Building those things into your regular life is what matters. Now, I'm not saying this drug alone will help people do that, but I'm saying if they get the head start that it offers them and we support them too, it will help them do that. And that will save them a lot of heartbreak in the long run and the NHS a fortune.
Well, this is it. Now, just speak to me a bit about this, because some people might say, why should the NHS / the taxpayer pay for people who have not been disciplined in their own diet to get thinner?
Because it will save money, ultimately. Human beings are human. We're flawed as heck. So we are all going to have things that we do wrong. You've already introduced this with your own interesting eating habits.
I'm a deeply flawed individual. That's no secret to anyone. Yes, carry on.
But yeah, as am I, as are we all. And that's the point. We can't devise an NHS that works for angels. We have to devise the NHS for the population we have. And ultimately, if we save a great deal of money on obesity-related illnesses like diabetes, like heart disease, in the long run, this will save money as well as giving healthy population.
Look, Emma, thank you very, very much. Thoroughly enjoyed that, and congratulations on everything that you've managed to achieve as well. That's Emma Burnell there, who's a journalist and a political consultant. Just to react, anyway, to this new, quote-unquote, miracle weight loss drug, what do you make of this? There is some reaction in the inbox about the idea that the taxpayer might now be paying for people to lose weight, I suppose, when the argument would be that maybe they got themselves into that situation and should get themselves out of it. There is a very compelling argument, I must say, which is that if it saves the NHS money in the long run, i.e. not having to deal with people's illnesses related to obesity, then potentially that's a good thing. What I do think is fascinating, though, isn't it, is that it is a weight loss injection that has kind of come to prominence because it was used by celebrities. And so, you know, when you were seeing all those celebs that were on the red carpet and all that, you think, goodness gracious me, how did you manage to look so beautiful? What kind of exercising regime have you had? There is every chance that they've just been injecting themselves with something that helps to make them thin. So, yet again, cooking the books, for want of a better phrase. I've got loads in the inbox, and thank you very much, everyone who has been getting in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. It has kicked right off at the news that Ngozi Fulani, who went on Good Morning Britain with earrings which appeared to have the map of Africa on it as well, was still criticising the royal family for not doing enough to help her after she accused them of essentially racism, institutional racism, for being asked which part of Africa she came from. She's saying that she stood down as the chief of charity Sister Space, not for any other reason, by the way, but because the royal family hasn't helped to stop the abuse that's come her way. That has got very fiery in the inbox. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'll go to those very, very shortly. And when I will come back as well, I will also be talking about Gary Lineker. Yes, that's right, because it has been a rather bad day for the manufacturer known as Jugs after he decided to compare the government's migration policy to that of Nazi Germany. Strong views, Gary. See you in a bit.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome, it's 4 o'clock. You're with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. Here's what I've got on the menu for you this hour. Well, Harry and Meghan, they've courted yet more controversy. They've decided to christen their daughter Princess Lilibet Diana. For a couple who appear to despise the royal family, that seems like an odd move. Also, I will be telling you exactly why Prince Harry might find himself in court. Gary Lineker's back on the news agenda, though. That's right, he basically compared the government's migration bill to something that the Nazis would have done, calls for him to be sacked. Where's BBC impartiality when it's at home? Here's what the British public think of it. Do you think that Gary Lineker on the BBC should be allowed to express political views?
No, not really.
Why not? Why not?
Because he's sports only.
And it's from one controversy to another one. Now, Ngozi Fulani has come out swinging against the palace yet again, saying they didn't do enough to protect her from the ambush of the British public and their abuse after she decided to accuse the royals of institutional racism. So there we go, that's a massive controversy for you. And yes, good news, ladies and gentlemen. That's right, good news, because apparently there's a cure for obesity. I can't help but feel like I am personally invested in this story. I've got all of this coming your way and much, much more. Keep yourself locked in, ladies and gents. It's going to be a hell of a ride. Get those emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Gary Lineker, should the BBC sack him? And is Ngozi Fulani right to say that the palace didn't do enough to protect her from abuse? But right now, it's your headlines with the wonderful Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. The top story on GB News today. The Prime Minister has accused the Labour leader of being on the side of the people smugglers as the pair went head-to-head in the House of Commons over the new illegal migration bill. Rishi Sunak defended the legislation which will remove those who enter the UK illegally and ban them from seeking asylum in the future. Sir Keir Starmer cast doubt on the plan, saying attempts to tackle the number of channel crossings in the last decade have failed and numbers have gone up. He says the Conservatives have lost control of UK borders, which Mr Sunak denied, accusing the opposition of supporting unlimited asylum.
The honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
Mr Speaker, when I was in charge of prosecutions, I extradited countless rapists, and the conviction rate for people smuggling was twice what it is today. I voted against his legislation last time because I said it wouldn't work. Since it became law, the numbers have gone up. He's proved me right.
The reward for information about the shooting of a police officer in Northern Ireland last month has been increased to £150,000. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot up to 10 times at a sports centre in Omagh after coaching his children's football match. He remains in a critical but stable condition in hospital. Detective Chief Inspector Eamon Corrigan says he believes 2 Ford Fiesta cars were used in the attempted murder.
A second Ford Fiesta vehicle was used in the attempted murder of DCI Caldwell. It is also a blue Ford Fiesta of a similar model. The second car had the registration number RLZ 9805 and was bought in the Glengormley area of Belfast towards the end of January. I believe this car travelled to Belfast around this time.
The Duke of Sussex will be at the centre of a High Court trial against Mirror Group newspapers over phone hacking allegations. He's one of several high-profile celebrities bringing action against the publisher. The tabloid newspaper is contesting the claims, arguing that some have been brought too late. The trial will begin on the 9th of May and last around 7 weeks. And dozens of flights have been disrupted in the south of England today as snow continues to fall across the country. And that's after the coldest night of the year so far. The Met Office saying temperatures dropped to minus 15.4 degrees in the Scottish Highlands overnight. That's the lowest March temperature in more than a decade. And National Highways is warning drivers in the West Midlands and the east of England not to travel unless their journey is essential. More sleet, snow and sub-zero temperatures are expected across all 4 UK nations until at least Friday. Now, Cheshire Police are investigating Manchester City's Kyle Walker over allegations of indecent exposure. It's understood to have happened on Sunday after City's 2-0 win over Newcastle. The force says the incident occurred in a Wilmslow bar in Manchester. No arrests have been made so far. And the Princess of Wales has given first aid to a wounded soldier as part of a military exercise on Salisbury Plain. Kate's also received demining training and viewed the weapons used by the 1st Battalion Irish Guards. This was the first Royals visit to the troops since receiving her honorary appointment as Royal Colonel last year. A working mother of 2 from Cambridgeshire has won over £800,000 on the Euro Millions lottery. Sally Ann Hanich had been working 2 jobs and had no idea she'd actually won until a month after the draw. She's now planning a dream trip to Japan, buying a new home and helping her kids get on the property ladder. The 55-year-old says she'll keep her job, though, at the local council. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Back to Patrick.
Oh, it's a great final story, that, wasn't it? I once bought a lottery ticket and then lost it, and so I will never know whether or not I should now be a millionaire. But anyway, let's get through this hour, and we start with Harry and Meghan, who have begun to use the titles Prince and Princess for their children Archie and Lilibet. And the news came after it was revealed that Lilibet, Princess, has been baptised in California. A spokesman for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex said, "I can confirm that Princess Lilibet Diana was christened on Friday, March the 3rd, by the Reverend John Taylor. And it is the first time that Lilibet has been publicly referred to as Princess. The children are still referred to as Master and Miss on Buckingham Palace's website. Look, to be honest with you, we can cut to the nub of this, can't we? Which is that Harry and Meghan have done their best to criticise the royal family at every single opportunity. They've written books, they've released audio books, they've done an interview crying into Oprah's bosom, there's the Netflix documentary, there's all sorts of this stuff, which have levelled some pretty heavy-duty accusations at what a horror show they think the royal family is. So why would you want your children to be shackled to that by adopting the title? Unless, of course, you wanted to shamelessly market them for your financial gain. Royal commentator Angela Levin joins us now. Angela, thank you very much. Were you shocked that Harry and Meghan have decided to give Lilibet Diana the royal title that it would appear would link them to the horror show that is our royal family for perpetuity?
Yes and no. I think that one is so used to their hypocrisy that these sorts of things aren't too surprising. I mean, but it doesn't make any sort of sense when even just a few days ago, Harry was complaining about his upbringing, complaining about his family, and then you want to give your kid a title that means they are, as you said, attached to that family. I mean, he wanted to get away. He wanted to get far away from it, have his freedom. And I think it's very strange. You know, they say one thing and do another. I think it's a snobby thing, really, that she will have this title and everyone will see that she's different from.
But actually, is it a shame? I'm sorry, but is it a shame for little Lilibet? Because if they have it their way, then everyone around them in Montecito will think that the royal family is a horrifically racist institution with ties to slavery and everything that's bad in the world. And now, when they introduce their daughter to all of their friends as a princess, they will know, won't they, that their daughter has links to horrific things like the slave trade and crimes around the world. And that can't be nice for your little girl.
No. I mean, every little girl wants to be a princess at some sort, but they want to do it for a party and then take it all off and be normal little girls. But I think it could be very embarrassing for her at school, where people would make fun of her, because she doesn't know any, she will know nothing about the royal family. She won't have got involved in it, and it's just a burden. I mean, I wonder whether it's part of Harry and Meghan's attempt to have a sort of woke alternative royal family that they're going to now build up with themselves and other people. I've been thinking of this for a long time, and whenever the royal family have an occasion, they do something to try and outsmart it. And this would be yet another way of setting up their own family royal. And I think it's very concerning, actually. It's a shame for the little girl.
Yes, it will, quite possibly, yes. And I couldn't help but notice another royal story that we're doing a lot of talking about. Isn't it amazing that Harry and Meghan announced this today, and then on the same day, Ngozi Fulani's back on the television, which is remarkable, also criticising the royal family. I also couldn't help but notice what she was wearing, Angela. And apparently this is now a deeply controversial thing to say, which is remarkable, which Ngozi Fulani, who was apparently so offended by Lady Susan Hussey asking her, what part of Africa do you come from, was on national television today appearing to wear earrings with the map of Africa on and in what some would regard as traditional dress, etc. She's back on saying the royal family haven't done enough to protect her from abuse. What do you think of that?
Yes, well, I think that it's very difficult for people who are not used to the way the royal goes and the press go. I mean, when she made that big fuss, it was almost inevitable that the press would investigate her charity,
yes,
which was quite complex. And also, I think she feels that it should be the Queen or King who say they're sorry to her personally. I mean, we're seeing now Queen Camilla talking to her very nicely at her meeting between people to try and stop domestic abuse. But I don't think you can expect anybody who's absolutely a royal to ring her up and apologise again when they've had an aide who's made an apology, when Lady Hussey, who was the one who asked her the question several times, where do you come from, where do you come from, who's apologised. They met in Buckingham Palace and they agreed that there was no harm done. So I think the royal family quite honestly just draw a line underneath it, but she hasn't, because she feels very sort of nervous now, and she's actually resigned from being the head of her own charity, which is very interesting. She said it's cost us a lot of money to do the PR. I mean, you have to be careful when you attack the royal family and complain about them. You've got a story that really works.
Well, yes, indeed. And also, it is worth noting that the question marks over Sister Space, which is the charity that Ngozi Fulani, or Marlene Headley, as I think I'm just going to call her now, was fronting up before. The question marks were valid questions, such as, where has the funding for this charity actually come from and for what reasons? And where has that money been used? And those are pretty reasonable questions. Look, thank you very much, Angela, as ever. Oh, by the way, sorry, Angela, just before I let you get going, Ngozi Fulani apparently named on the list of some of the most inspirational women. Oh, it's International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day, Angela. Great to have you on. Thank you very much. But do you think that Ngozi Fulani should be one of the most influential women of 2023 now?
No.
No? All right, short and sweet. Good stuff. Angela, thank you very much. Angela Levin, that royal guru.
One of the reasons she shouldn't be is that her charity is for only people of dark colour. She doesn't help white people and she doesn't help mixed race. And I think for that reason she might be doing have done a very good job with her charity. But I think if you stop people coming because of their colour, that is not a particularly inspiring effect.
OK, Angela Levin there, the royal biographer. Thank you very, very much. I will no doubt be double-checking whether or not, of course, Ngozi Fulani's charity does indeed do that. We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex will be at the centre of a planned High Court trial against a tabloid newspaper publisher over phone hacking allegations. That's the ruling of a judge today. Harry is one of a number of high-profile figures bringing damages claims against Mirror Group newspapers over alleged unlawful information gathering as its titles. There we go. Our royal reporter Cameron Walker is here to explain all of this for us.
Yes, so as you said, a number of high-profile figures are involved in this particular trial, including the former Girls Aloud singer Cheryl, the estate of the late singer George Michael as well. The trial's due to start taking place on the 9th of May, which is 3 days after the coronation and lasts kind of 6 to 7 weeks. But Prince Harry has been chosen by the judge to be one of 3 or 4 test cases within this trial. And the reason for that is he's an obvious selection, and that is a quote from a judge, because his claim covers an extensive period of time, and he had 24 private investigators working on his particular case. So the Duke's case is that 148 separate articles published between 1996 and 2010, so quite a large time period, included information that was allegedly obtained through unlawful means. In other words, perhaps phone hacking as an example, or alleged phone hacking, I should say, as an example. Mirror Group newspapers, who owns the Daily Mirror, Sunday People, they are contesting the claims because they are arguing that some of those cases have been brought too late, because all of this allegedly happened back in the 90s and the early 2000s. Clearly, it's now 2023.
Well, some of the reporters might even be dead. We don't know, do we? And we'll have to wait and see.
Well, exactly. And the publisher of titles has previously settled a number of other claims against it in relation to unlawful information gathering. But in terms of these particular celebrities, their particular stories and articles focused on them, that has not been gone to trial yet. So we will await exactly what's said in that trial from May the 9th onwards.
Well, indeed. And, of course, one would imagine that Prince Harry would relish his opportunity to have his day in court and not just spout it out on Oprah. I suppose if he doesn't say it in court, he could just tell Oprah, couldn't he, and then tell us. Cameron, thank you very much. Cameron Walker there, our royal reporter. Now, the government's proposed law to try and stop small boats arriving in the UK dominated Prime Minister's questions earlier today. Rishi Sunak said the new law on illegal migration will help achieve a priority for British people. But Labour's Sir Keir Starmer countered this by pressing the PM on how many migrants have actually been returned under existing laws, and accused the PM of being deluded that the bill would actually reduce the number of boats crossing the Channel.
The honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr. Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
Mr. Speaker, when I was in charge of prosecutions, I extradited countless rapists. The conviction rate for people smuggling was twice what it is today. I voted against his legislation last time because I said it wouldn't work. Since it became law, the numbers have gone up. He's proved me right.
Yes, a little bit of panto going on in the House of Commons earlier. For what it's worth, we will be returning shortly to this story, but in relation to Gary Lineker, who accused the government's policy of being something reminiscent of the Nazis. That has caused a lot of controversy. A lot of people saying that Gary Lineker should either stand down or be sacked by the BBC. It's not particularly impartial stuff, is it? But let's cross live now to GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is in Westminster. And there was rather a lot of mudslinging, Darren, wasn't there, between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer?
Yeah, maybe not surprised looking at the surface around here at Westminster. A pretty damp, miserable day. As you say, quite a lot of mudslinging, taking chunks out of each other, though that is, in many ways, the art of our politics, isn't it? It's what PMQs is all about, a bit of theatre. I think, interestingly, the strongest line the Prime Minister had against Keir Starmer is this idea that Labour doesn't really properly have a plan. Now, they would argue they do. It's about trying to smash those gangs. It's about trying to open up alternative safe routes for asylum seekers. But it does feel that Labour haven't really properly kind of got to grips with what the alternative action they would take compared to the government. As for Keir Starmer, he also has quite a valid point in saying, well, you know what, the Conservatives have been in power for 13 years and far from this problem getting any better, it appears to be getting worse. And while they always talk tough on immigration, in the end, actually, the action really hasn't stood the proper test. And I think that's the real concern for the Prime Minister here, is having made this a massive, massive issue with a podium literally with "Stop the Boats" blazoned across it. If it gets to the time of the next election, Patrick, and the boats are still coming, I'm not entirely sure the British public will be that forgiving. In saying that, the government would say this is pretty tough action. It will act as a deterrent. And in the end, the British public are on side with this. They do want to tackle this crisis. They do want it sorted. And that this plan will work despite the objections from Labour, maybe the House of Lords and the courts too.
Indeed, look, Darren, thank you very much. Our political editor there, Darren McCaffrey. Of course, it would, I think many people would argue, it'd be a bit rich from Keir Starmer to claim that, oh, well, you haven't stopped the votes. If Keir Starmer does try to continually vote against every little piece of legislation that would act as a deterrent to people crossing the Channel or allow us to deport them. So there you go. Anyway, BBC presenter Gary Lineker has been heavily criticised for comparing the Tories' plans to tackle the migrant crisis to Nazi Germany. As a rule, don't really bring up the Nazis. Doesn't tend to end that well. Lineker responded to a video from Suella Braverman where she outlined the government's illegal migrant bill by saying it was beyond awful. When he was pulled up on his comment, Lineker replied, "There's no huge influx." So, I mean, there's that, isn't there? But there we go. "We take far fewer refugees than other major European countries." You tend to be larger geographically, Gary, but there we go. "This is just an immeasurably cruel policy directed at the most vulnerable people in language that is not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 30s. And I'm out of order." Well, yeah. Yeah, you are a bit. A source says the BBC bosses are having a frank conversation with Lineker, who just a few months ago was found to have breached BBC impartiality rules following a comment he made about the Conservatives. Well, Lineker is the BBC's best-paid presenter. It was revealed last July that he was on £1.35 million a year. And I went out and about a bit and asked... it must be sort of rather small cross-section of the British public, what they think about Gary Lineker and whether or not he should keep his position after his comments. It was raining in my defence. I didn't spend long out there. Do you think that Gary Lineker on the BBC should be allowed to express political views?
No, not really.
Why not? Why not?
Because he's sports only.
In my opinion, he was right.
You think he was right?
Yes, I think he was right.
I think the immigration policy is horrible, and I think we're less of a country by supporting something like this.
That's obviously fair enough, completely.
Yeah.
The question mark is over whether or not Gary Lineker as a BBC employee should be...
Doesn't bother me. I think people should say their opinions more, and I'm sick of people not saying what they really think.
Views on it, pretty much where the BBC stand with it. You know, like, I don't think he should be doing what he's doing. Yeah, he should be sacked.
Right, well, there we go. A mixed view there, a mixed view of people. I'm joined now by Jake Wallace-Simons, who is the editor of the Jewish Chronicle. Jake, thank you very much. Good to see you again. Do you think that Gary Lineker was out of order to bring up the Nazis?
Of course he was out of order. Well, you know, that's a question which the answer is quite obvious. I mean, you know, to take the worst sort of modern genocide in Western Europe as a political tool to make an anti-immigration argument, a pro-immigration argument, is grossly crass and grossly offensive and just morally wrong. I mean, you know, this is an attempt to exterminate an entire race of people using factories of death. That, by any measure, is not what Suella Braverman is trying to do or is aiming towards. And to compare the two is outrageous.
Well, indeed. I mean, especially given the fact that one of the things that I think goes underreported is we've given the French tens and tens and tens of millions of pounds to try to stop people taking a journey across the Channel, which can prove deadly. And the British taxpayer has already forked out rather a lot of money when it comes to keeping people over here safe and well. Do you think that Gary Lineker should apologise to the Jewish community?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that there is a strong moral argument in favour of the government's policy. Now, people might not agree with that, but a strong argument exists, which is that taking tough action to stop these small boats from coming over cuts off the people smuggling networks, prevents organised crime, and enables a fairer asylum system to be rolled out. Now, people can disagree with that, but the fact is that there was no moral argument whatsoever in favour of the genocide of the Jews. And for that reason, Gary Lineker does owe the Jewish community an apology, and anybody else who was affected by Nazi violence an apology, and frankly, the British public an apology, given the fact that everybody in Britain, their families, their grandparents, their great-grandparents were affected deeply by Nazi aggression. And it's not something that should be brought in this way, so it should be co-opted to a political agenda.
What should the BBC do about it?
Well, I mean, this is hardly the first time that Gary Lineker has offended in this way. He's known for disregarding the BBC guidelines, and you get the sense that Gary feels that he's, you know, too big to be silenced. That, you know, he can easily walk away from BBC and earn equally as much money elsewhere, and therefore just cocks his nose at them or thumbs his nose at them and ignores any kind of BBC guidelines. So I think the BBC really does need to get tough now, because you know, where Gary goes, other people will follow.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Gary Lineker didn't seem to mind too much about Qatar did he? Which I think you could argue has got some policies that are, whilst I obviously don't want to fall into the same trap as Gary Lineker here and compare anything to Nazi Germany or the Holocaust, certainly pretty awful when it comes to genuine human rights, etc., etc. He didn't seem to mind too much about Qatar, did he? But of course, us trying to make sure that people don't drown in the Channel or come into Britain illegally, that's, as far as he's concerned, where he draws the line. Do you find that bizarre?
Absolutely. I mean, he does appear to hail from this sort of hard left political milieu, which has a very selective approach to the things that it applies outrage to. I mean, it gets very, very outraged about Israel, for example, and not very outraged about Qatar or about the humanitarian abuses in Palestine, in Egypt, you know, in other places around the world. You know, so this sort of selective outrage is a prism through which he does appear to look at the world. We've seen that today in this grossly offensive and overblown, ridiculous language he's used about Suella Braverman's policies.
Yeah, indeed. Look, Jay, thank you very much, as ever, for your time. Good to see you again. Jake Wallace-Simmons there, who is the editor of the Jewish Chronicle. Well, Gary Lineker, he's been active on Twitter today, Wednesday not, and he's hit back at his critics. He tweeted, "Great to see the freedom of speech champions out in force this morning, demanding silence from those with whom they disagree." And I think it's interesting, this, because it's not really about the freedom of speech stuff. I think everyone, look, I mean, this job that I do here is fantastic, OK? I absolutely love doing it. Freedom of speech, you know, bang in favour of it. But the BBC does have impartiality guidelines, doesn't it? Mainly because it's taxpayer funded. And if you start expressing quite strong, very strong political opinions using things like the Holocaust and Nazi Germany, etc., to make those political opinions, I think people have a right to ask what the BBC is going to do about it, Gary. But there we go. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And yes, if you like watching TV reporters freezing outside in the cold, then I have got a treat for you, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, indeed. I am Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
Hello, it's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Tune in tonight at 8 p.m. for State of the Nation. Tonight, we'll be joined by my fantastic panel. Former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, is here for a head-to-head with the Labour MP, Lloyd Russell Moyle. Also, amidst the government's new bold immigration legislation, I will have a sit-down with Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick to see if it's all it's cracked up to be. All that and much more coming up at 8 p.m. on State of the Nation.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, Britain is apparently in the grip of a big freeze, and the Met Office is predicting nighttime sub-zero temperatures in all 4 UK nations until at least Friday. So, with more snow set to sweep the nation in the coming days, the Met Office says last night was the coldest night of the year so far. What do you reckon the people of Sweden or Norway or wherever make of the things that I'm reporting on here now? Anyway, temperatures in the Highlands dropped to this year's record low of minus 15.2 degrees Celsius overnight. All right, that is pretty chilly, to be fair. There were several yellow weather warnings for snow and ice currently in place across the country. Joining me on the show now is our South East of England reporter, Ray Addison, who I understand is freezing cold outside Farnborough train station. He's not even got gloves on. Good lad, Ray. How are you?
It's freezing, Patrick. It really is cold. I've been travelling all around the southeast today. I was over in Surrey and Ashvale. I was in Hazelmere as well. Now I've come here to Farnborough in Hampshire just to see what kind of disruption there's been. And despite all the alerts, the disruption's been fairly minimal, unless you're trying to get a flight earlier on from Bristol Airport, of course, because they closed temporarily as they got rid of all that snow from the runways. Gatwick as well was actually running most of their services on time. Well, there has been some individual cases of disruption. Now, here at Farnborough train station, they operate South Western Railways out of here, and they're saying they're going to see some moderate delays into the evening. I took a wander up to the platform, and probably 1 in 3 of the trains that were running seem to be delayed, one by as much as about 40 minutes, although if you travel on the rail service, maybe that wouldn't be too unexpected for rush hour. Southeastern trains, which operates predominantly in London, are saying that passengers should consider travelling home early today if they can, because there's been predictions of more snow into the late afternoon, and they're saying that could cause severe disruption from 5 p.m. onwards, and some routes may even need to close earlier than usual. Now, they're also saying that to try and prevent that, they're going to be working through the night to heat up the tracks and try and make sure that all the points systems don't freeze over. So that will hopefully minimise disruption for people who are commuting tomorrow. Now, of course, National Highways South East at midday this afternoon issued a severe weather alert for people on the road. So they're saying that there could be a chance of delays. There could also be stranded cars, stranded passengers as well. And perhaps most worrying for our listeners and our viewers as well, some rural communities, they say, could get cut off either by ice, by snow, or of course by flooding as well. Now, earlier on as well, the UK HSA issued a level 3 alert. What does that mean? There's an increased health risk to vulnerable patients because of the cold, and also perhaps a disruption to NHS services as well if ambulances and the like can't get to the patients that they need to. Now, that yellow weather warning is in place from the Met Office until 7 a.m. on Thursday. However, experts are saying that snow is likely until Friday.
OK, all right, good stuff. Now, Ray, if it's all right with you, we're just going to get you to stand out there for another 2 or 3 hours, and we'll go back to you on and off throughout the course of the show. Is that all right? No? All right, see you, Ray. Ray Addison there, who's outside Farnborough train station. Good stuff. By the way, look, right now, I obviously do not want to diminish to anyone who is struggling with this, and I hope that, the sub-zero temperatures do not cause any genuine harm to anyone. But, I mean, when you see weather reports from America and places like that, it's not the same. I mean, Ray Addison might have been a bit chilly, but good grief, it's hardly a snowdrift, is it? Anyway, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. Find out why Ngozi Fulani has got more harsh words for Buckingham Palace. But first, it is your latest news headlines with the wonderful Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. The top story on GB News today, the Prime Minister has accused the Labour leader of being on the side of the people smugglers as the pair went head-to-head in the Commons over the new illegal migration bill. Rishi Sunak defended the legislation, which will remove those who enter the UK illegally and ban them from seeking asylum later. Sir Keir Starmer cast doubt on the plans, saying attempts to tackle the number of channel crossings in the last decade have failed and numbers have gone up. He says the Conservatives have lost control of UK borders, which Mr Sunak denied, accusing the opposition of supporting unlimited asylum.
The honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
Mr Speaker, when I was in charge of prosecutions, I extradited countless rapists. The conviction rate for people smuggling was twice what it is today. I voted against his legislation last time because I said it wouldn't work. Since it became law, the numbers have gone up. He's proved me right.
Meanwhile, the reward for information about the shooting of a police officer in Northern Ireland last month has been increased to £150,000. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot up to 10 times at a sports centre in Omagh after coaching his children's football match. He remains in a critical but stable condition in hospital. And the Duke of Sussex will be at the centre of a High Court trial against Mirror Group newspapers over phone hacking allegations. He's one of several high-profile celebrities bringing action against the publisher. The tabloid newspaper is contesting the claims, arguing that some have been brought too late. But the trial will start on the 9th of May and last around 7 weeks. Those are your headlines. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Right, I'm going to delve into the terrifying world of my inbox now. GBViews at gbnews.uk. A couple of absolute whoppers in there so far. First one being Gary Lineker. Lineker should come and live where I do, rather than his gated mansion. That's from Tony. This is in response to Gary Lineker comparing the Conservatives' policy to stop illegal immigration to something that the Nazis would do. As I understand it, the BBC have said they're going to have strong words with Gary. Gary doubling down, saying people just want to curtail his freedom of speech, etc. All for freedom of speech, of course, and he's perfectly entitled to his political views. The question mark is, as a BBC employee with the BBC impartiality rules, whether or not he should be allowed to go and comment on things like that. But, Tony, to take your email, yes, I think that you have a great point. I think there's a lot of these people, including, by the way, massive circles of the British media, who, if they just went a bit further north than the Watford Gap, I mean, they get a massive nosebleed, but if they went a bit further north than the Watford Gap, they might actually realise that a world exists outside of their lovely gated North London mansions or wherever they live, and that people do have issues with illegal immigration and the burden that things are doing, like migrant hotels, etc. Lineker apologised. You're joking. He is too arrogant. He should be fired. That's from Carol. Thank you very much, Carol. There's rather a lot of this. Stop picking on Gary, says Joe. OK, there you go. Although that is followed by several different laughing emojis, so I'm not sure Joe really means that. But very shortly, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to find out why senior SNP politicians are ripping each other apart. I've got all of that coming your way and much, much more. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Ngozi Fulani, or Marlene Headley, the woman who said that she was the victim of institutional racism at Buckingham Palace, is back in the news today. Rejoice. Fulani was asked where she really came from by Lady Susan Hussey at a reception at the palace last November. Now, Lady Sussey resigned a few days later. Buckingham Palace said as well that they were deeply sorry for the incident and apologised for the distress and difficulty it has caused to Miss Fulani, Marlene Headley. But this is what she had to say about it this morning.
Who are they apologising to? If you're sorry, tell me you're sorry. If you're not, it speaks for itself.
I think there's a number of things wrong with that statement, if I'm honest. I think the agreements that they've proposed, that they've met or honoured, are not the agreements that we set out with them. And I think if you're able to make a statement in the middle of the night to the public, why can't you give the apology that you did?
Yeah, I don't see what is so hard to say, I'm sorry. You sent me an invitation, so you know how to find me, you know how to say sorry. If you're sorry, then say sorry. If you're not, I get it. But when you make this apology to everybody, I don't know who you're apologising to.
Just going to put this out there now. Reading a report here that Lady Susan Hussey had a meeting with Ngozi Fulani, who rather interestingly was on national television this morning wearing interesting dress and, of course, as well, with earrings with the map of Africa on them. She offered her, quote, sincere apologies to Ngozi Fulani in person at a meeting that both parties agreed was filled with warmth and understanding. So that's interesting, isn't it? Joining me now to discuss this is GB News' presenter. It's Nana Aquia. Nana, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. Right, what do you reckon to this latest interaction from Marlene Headley?
Well, to be honest with you, I couldn't stop laughing. I mean, this woman does not want an apology. What happened there was that they had the second meeting, so in December, after sort of a month after the incident, the palace invited Ngozi Fulani to speak, where they had this wonderful meeting. And one of the things that they pledged was to deepen their awareness and sensitivity. And they were great the opportunity to learn about issues in the race area. And they also agreed that there be no further comment. But for some odd reason, this woman's just not happy with the apology. So then she demanded more. But then, last night, the palace issued another apology, where they said a number of pledges were made, which have all been honoured, including enhancing diversity and inclusive programs, and it also agreed no further media comment to be made. For the avoidance of any doubt, we are deeply sorry for the incident that took place and apologise for the that it caused Ms. Fulani. This was last night, but she's still not happy.
Okay. I mean, it is bonkers. Nana, I'm very sorry about this. There's a slight issue with your audio, okay, which we're going to go back to you. I'm just going to shamelessly fill for time for a minute or two before we go back to you and sort that out. Nana Okoye there. We will be returning to her. But yes, these views from Ngozi Fulani do appear to be quite confusing, don't they, I think, to a lot of people. She was on Good Morning Britain this morning, and what she was saying was that essentially the latest apology, which I think she was possibly quite lucky to get, given the fact that it had escaped published consciousness for quite a while, this was not enough. Who are they apologising to? She was on with a lady next to her as well, who I believe is her daughter, and they were just rabbiting on about how they weren't really sorry. What more does this lady want from the British public? Lady Susan Hussey, who has a lifetime of distinguished service as the Queen's former lady-in-waiting, who has served this country and our royal family for decades upon decades, fell on her own sword, said I'm sorry to her in person. Clearly, I think it's fair to say, and anyone who I've ever spoken to who's met Lady Susan Hussey has been absolutely categorical about the fact that Lady Susan Hussey will not have meant to cause any racial offence whatsoever to Marlene Headley. Why on earth now is this apology not enough? And is it not interesting, do we think, that she's also chosen to step down as the boss of Sister Space, this charity, after scrutiny was raised about the reasons behind why Sister Space received the amount of money that it might have done in donations, and then where that money was spent as well? I think it's fascinating now that it's the abuse is being blamed on that, which I find bizarre. But anyway, get your views coming in. I know people feel very, very strongly about this. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Unfortunately, we're not going to go back to Nana right now, but we will try to go back to her in a second. I'm going to move on because the race to become the new SNP leader got nasty last night. The three candidates took part in a televised debate, and Kate Forbes criticised Humza Yousaf's record as Transport Minister, Justice Minister and Health Minister. Meanwhile, Ash Regan said the party had lost its way. Joining me now is columnist at The Scotsman and former MSP is Brian Monteith. Brian, thank you very much. Get the popcorn ready, because it is becoming increasingly obvious. It's becoming increasingly obvious why the SNP were desperate to have all of these hustings shielded from public view, because they don't want anyone to see what a hot mess it is behind the scenes.
Well, it was highly entertaining last night, because what we last saw was that there are many views within the SNP that have been covered up for years. So tight was the discipline in the SNP that we always thought what the leader said, that Alex Salmond and then Nicola Sturgeon, was gospel. But now that Nicola Sturgeon is leaving the scene and hasn't settled who should be her successor, it's opening up, and they're fighting over the record. And really, Humza Yousaf, as the continuity candidate, is coming off very badly.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because also Humza Yousaf does have to answer for some of the briefs that he was responsible for, which do include allegedly being caught without proper documentation, shall we say, whilst he was driving, whilst he was Transport Minister, which is not a great look. There is, of course, something that I think again goes underreported with Humza Yousaf, which is that he did, and his wife did, try to pin racism accusations at a nursery school for not allowing their child in there because they had a, quote, Muslim-sounding name, when it turned out that they later had to withdraw those allegations because it just wasn't true, as the charity themselves said they were baseless. And when you look at his actual record, and then you look at maybe, in that sense, his moral compass as well, is that not quite so astounding that he is still the front-runner to become the next First Minister of Scotland?
Well, you've got to remember that when it comes to leadership elections in parties, that the members of parties generally represent a more devout following than those that might vote for a party. So the same goes with Labour, choosing Corbyn. One could say the same went for Truss over Sunak, or Ian Duncan Smith over Kenneth Clarke. And you could say that here we have the party members said to be favouring the suboptimal Sturgeon, the continuity of chaos and calamity that Humza Yousaf represents. It would be amazing if they go for Kate Forbes or Ash Regan, because neither of them have the backing of the big hitters in the SNP.
Well, to be fair,
they might.
Ash Regan isn't a household in her own home, is she?
They might bring the SNP back to more the middle ground of the Scottish public.
Yeah, I mean, Kate Forbes apparently is the epitome of the fact that you cannot have public, basic religious views from any of the major religions, apparently, and be compatible with what the woke lot want from you. And Ash Regan, as I said there, does not appear to be a household name in her own home, Brian.
Well, I think we have to question this issue about Kate Forbes' religious views being toxic in the political sphere. She's a Presbyterian, and Humza Yousaf is a Muslim. They are effectively members of socially conservative religions. Their views generally don't differ a great deal if you go by what those religions stand for. And both have said that they would not let those their religions actually govern how they would vote, how they would decide policy. That doesn't mean they don't have a moral conscience of their own and what they would want to believe and support, but it does mean they wouldn't actually enforce their religion on other people. And I think that's a fairly straightforward thing. And I think it's the honesty of Kate Forbes to say how she would vote on certain issues that is refreshing. It makes her attractive.
People would be, I think, forgiven for finding it refreshing. Well, I just find it bonkers that someone can come out and say, and just be honest, because if anything, it promotes lying in politics, doesn't it? Because it goes, right, well, I can't say this now because there's no chance anyone will vote for me, even though I'm quite a nice person. So I'll just lie anyway. I'll just say what they all want. Look, Brian, thank you very much. Always an absolute pleasure, my good man. Brian Monteith there, columnist at The Scotsman, former MSP, which I find very difficult to say, apparently. Moving on. It's the second day of the trial of the man accused of murdering Olivia Pratt-Corbell. The 9-year-old was shot while she was inside her home in Liverpool last August. Thomas Cashman is charged with murder. We can cross live now to Sophie Reaper at Manchester Crown Court for an update. Sophie, thank you very much. What's the latest, please?
Well, Patrick, yesterday we heard the prosecution's opening statement, which was all about what they allege. But today it was all about evidence, things that we know as fact. So this afternoon, the jury has been shown various virtual maps and CCTV footage, which places Thomas Cashman at various locations on the 22nd of August leading up to that shooting. Now, we reached quite a significant moment on the timeline at around 9 p.m. because up until that point, it's an established fact that the man that we're seeing in the CCTV footage and maps is definitely Thomas Cashman. It's agreed that it is him. However, when we reach this point, it then becomes that the prosecution alleges that this is Thomas Cashman because he disputes that he is the man that we've been seeing in the CCTV footage after that point. We also heard today that shortly after this period, there's a time of around 36 minutes where the man that the prosecution allege is Mr. Cashman disappears for that time, and they say that that must be because he remains in that relatively small area for whatever reason to avoid being captured on CCTV footage. Now, finally, the jury this afternoon have also been taken through the moments just before, during and after the attack that would lead to the death of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Now, court has concluded for the day today, but it's going to resume tomorrow morning here at Manchester Crown Court.
Yes, indeed. Look, Sophie, thank you very, very much for bringing us an update on that case. We'll bring you more as and when we get it. Sophie Reaper there, who's at Manchester Crown Court. Deeply distressing and disturbing case, that, isn't it? Look, I'm just going to go into the inbox a little bit before we wrap this hour up. Loads of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer clashing over illegal migration. Lots of reaction as well to what Gary Lineker has said. I know he's being called to stand down, which he's clearly not going to do, from the BBC, or be sacked, which is possibly more likely, as a result of him accusing the government of essentially invoking things that the Nazis did by wanting to stop illegal immigration in the Channel. Peter says Starmer seems to lose and regain his memory quite a lot. The other day, he couldn't say if he had a meeting with Sue Gray months ago, but today he suddenly remembers that the backlog of government immigration quotes. Yes, it is interesting, that, isn't it, as well? Also, remarkable, isn't it, that Keir Starmer can't say what a woman is? But there we go. Alban says, instead of the politicians arguing with each other, how about having a referendum for the people on whether we back this bill or not? And if the majority do, then any attempt to block the government processing the bill will be treated as treason with immediate effect. We've gone quite heavy on the treason line there, Alban, but I do take your point. And I think, realistically, you might be about to get, in a way, a de facto referendum on this, because I think there's probably going to be a general election that will be based largely around illegal immigration and the issue that's going on in the Channel. What Rishi Sunak will be hoping for is that some of the boats, at least, have stopped coming by then. But what Labour will obviously be hoping for is that they haven't, and they can say, it isn't working. The problem for the British public might be, if this bill doesn't work, do you vote for a party that at least tried something that failed, or do you vote for a party that, at least on paper, doesn't appear to have stopping the illegal Channel crossings in its top 5 priorities? So potentially not a great choice, this, for the British public, but we will have to wait and see how that pans out. I think we've got time as well for a little one here about Ngozi Fulani. This is a story that's got a lot of you very, very worked up. She was, of course, the lady who claimed racism, institutional racism within the royal family. Lady Susan Hussey, we all remember, asked her where she was from, allegedly repeatedly, and including which part of Africa she was from. Well, Ngozi Fulani, real name Marlene Headley, rocked up on television this morning with earrings with the map of Africa on, and some would say as well maybe wearing a slightly traditional African dress, as it were, to say that an apology that the royal family put out last night, again, wasn't enough, despite the fact that she'd already met Susan Hussey in person, and it would appear anyway, accepts an apology. Soot has been on the inbox, gbviews at gbnews.uk, to say that potentially she might just be after some form of compensation. We'll have to wait and see what she thinks about all of that. Look, make sure you keep your views coming in, and I have got absolutely loads coming your way, including some of those issues that I've just touched on there. Should the BBC sack Gary Lineker for comparing the government's illegal migration bill to Germany in the 30s? Lively debate coming your way.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's 5 o'clock. You're with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. And I've got loads coming your way in the next hour. I will, of course, be talking about Harry and Meghan. They have decided, despite trashing the royal family, to christen their daughter, Princess Lilibet Diana. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? Do you think there's a bit of cheek involved there? Gary Lineker as well, he's in hot water. There are calls for the BBC to sack him because he decided to actually compare the Tories' immigration policy to something that the Nazis would have done. As a rule, never really bring up the Nazis, Gary. It doesn't quite work out that well. I went out and spoke to the British public earlier to see what they make of the whole situation. Do you think that Gary Lineker on the BBC should be allowed to express political views?
No, not really.
Why not? Why not?
Because he's sports only.
And apparently there is a new miracle injection that can stop you getting fat, which is just as well for me. One of the curses of me having to now do introductions from our picture wall is the fact that people can see that I've got a body like a dropped lasagna, so maybe I should get involved. Anyway, all of that coming your way, and much, much more. GBViews at gbnews.uk, people. Keep those emails flooding in. Pretty straightforward. Should the BBC sack Gary Lineker? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Right now, though, is your headlines with the wonderful Polly Middlehurst.
Good evening to you. And the top story on GB News today, the Prime Minister has accused the Labour leader of being on the side of the people smugglers as the pair went head-to-head in the House of Commons today over the new illegal migration bill. Rishi Sunak defended the legislation, which will remove those who enter the UK illegally and ban them from seeking asylum in future. Sir Keir Starmer, though, cast doubt on the plan, saying attempts to tackle the number of channel crossings in the last decade have failed and numbers have gone up. He says the Conservatives have lost control of UK borders, which Mr Sunak denied, accusing the opposition of supporting unlimited asylum.
The honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
Mr Speaker, when I was in charge of prosecutions, I extradited countless rapists, and the conviction rate for people smuggling was twice what it is today. I voted against his legislation last time because I said it wouldn't work. Since it became law, the numbers have gone up. He's proved me right.
Meanwhile, in other news today, the reward for information about the shooting of a police officer in Northern Ireland last month has been increased to £150,000. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot up to 10 times at a sports centre in Omagh after coaching his children's football match. He remains in a critical but stable condition in hospital. Detective Chief Inspector Eamon Corrigan says he believes 2 Ford Fiestas were used in the attempted murder.
A second Ford Fiesta vehicle was used in the attempted murder of DCI Caldwell. It is also a blue Ford Fiesta of a similar model. The second car had the registration number RLZ 9805 and was bought in the Glengormley area of Belfast towards the end of January. I believe this car travelled to Belfast around this time.
The Duke of Sussex will be at the centre of a High Court trial against Mirror Group newspapers over phone hacking allegations. He's one of several high-profile celebrities bringing action against the publisher. The tabloid newspaper is contesting the claims, arguing that some have been brought too late. Nevertheless, the trial will begin on the 9th of May and last around 7 weeks. RMT union members will vote tomorrow on a new pay offer from Network Rail aimed at resolving a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Union members yesterday suspended the industrial action which was due to take place on the 17th and 16th of March. The union says the new pay offer does involve extra money, but they say industrial action with 14 other rail companies will still go ahead later this month. And dozens of flights have been disrupted in the south of England as snow continues to fall across the country. It's after the coldest night of the year so far. The Met Office saying temperatures dropped to minus 15.4 degrees in the Scottish Highlands overnight. That's the lowest March temperature in more than a decade. And National Highways is warning drivers in the West Midlands and the east of England not to travel unless their journey is absolutely necessary. Ahead, more sleet, snow and sub-zero temperatures are expected across all 4 UK nations until at least Friday. Now, Cheshire police are investigating Manchester City's Kyle Walker over allegations of indecent exposure. It's understood the incident may have happened on Sunday after City's 2-0 win over Newcastle. The force says the incident occurred in a Wilmslow bar in Manchester. No arrests have been made so far. And lastly, the Princess of Wales has given first aid to a wounded soldier as part of a military exercise on Salisbury Plain. Kate's also received demining training and viewed the weapons used by 1st Battalion Irish Guards. This was the Royal's first visit to the troops since receiving her honorary appointment as Royal Colonel last year. That's all from me. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
Right, welcome back, everybody. Now, we start this hour with the Duke and Duchess of Woke Sussex. They've started to use the titles Prince and Princess for their children Archie and Lilibet, which has caused massive controversy because for a period of time it did seem like they were just relentlessly mugging off the royal family. So why would they want their beautiful little daughter to be shackled to something that they don't like? But the news came after it was revealed that Lilibet was baptised in California on Friday. A spokesman for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex said, "I confirm that Princess Lilibet Diana was christened on Friday, March the 3rd, by the Reverend John Taylor." And we are, of course, all over the moon. I'm joined now by our royal reporter, Cameron Walker. Possibly one of the more controversial christenings that I can remember.
Well, quite possibly, yes. It did come as a bit of a surprise when the Sussex spokesperson told me that Lilibet, their youngest daughter, their only daughter, has indeed been baptised on Friday. Not that significant in itself, but the fact that she has been titled Princess for that christening is the first time we have heard Harry and Meghan refer to either of their children as having a Prince or Princess title. Remember, Prince Harry once referred to growing up in the royal family as causing him genetic pain.
Yes.
So, as
and
you
now,
said,
naturally, that has to be inflicted on the next generation, yes?
Yeah, so from a Sussex perspective, they are basically saying it's understood that they didn't want to deny their kids the titles if they chose in the future to want to use their royal titles and perhaps be part of the royal family. 1917 letters patent from George V basically states that the rules are that any grandchild of the monarch from the male line automatically has the rights to be a prince and princess. So upon the death of Queen Elizabeth II, Charles is now king. Therefore, Archie and Lilibet both have the right to be prince and princess, and that is exactly what we're seeing here. In terms of the royal family's perspective, I don't believe they were given a heads up. It doesn't look like they were, because the royal family website still states that Archie and Lilibet are still Master and Miss, although it's understood that the websites will be updated in due course.
Yes, indeed. OK, all right. I mean, it is rather controversial, isn't it? I just fail to understand why, if you decide that the royal family is potentially a horrifically racist institution that's caused you an immense amount of genetic pain going forward, why you would want to tie your child to that. But there is also, of course, the issue of Prince Harry when it comes as well to there's a High Court situation taking place as well, isn't there? So it's a big day for Harry.
It is a big day for Harry, but to be fair to the Duke of Sussex, it wasn't him that announced this High Court case. Yes, so he is going to, we think, be at the centre of this particular High Court battle against Mirror Group newspapers over alleged phone hacking and unlawful information gathering at the newspapers. So Harry is one of a number of high-profile public figures who are taking part in this. Cheryl from Girls Aloud, for example, and the estate of the late singer George Michael as well. They are all part of this particular lawsuit. Now, the judge has picked out essentially 3 or 4 of these celebrities, including Prince Harry, to basically be test cases for this trial. Now, the reason the judge has chosen Prince Harry is because his allegations, I suppose, spread over many, many years, from 1996 all the way up to 2010. 24 private investigators Prince Harry has had working on his particular case. 148 articles published between that time frame. Some of which include information, including information that was allegedly obtained through unlawful means. In other words, alleged phone hacking. Yeah. Now, Mirror Group newspapers is essentially contesting the claims, saying that they've been brought in way too late, bearing in mind that this all happened in the late 90s and early 2000s. But they have previously settled a number of other claims, separate claims, against various parties in relation to unlawful information gathering and phone hacking. So we'll have to wait for that trial to start. It's set to start on the 9th of May, and we'll see what happens then.
We await with bated breath. Yes, indeed, Cameron. Thank you very much. You've been an incredibly busy man today. Cheers for that, Cameron Walker there. Our Royal Reporter. Now, in politics today, the Prime Minister has accused the Labour leader of being on the side of people smugglers, as the two have gone head-to-head in the Commons over the new illegal migration bill, which, of course, Gary Lineker has famously decided to compare to something the Nazis would do. Starmer cast doubt on the plans, though, saying attempts to tackle the number of channel crossings have failed and numbers have gone up. Going on to say the Conservatives have lost control of UK borders, which Mr Sunak denied, accusing the opposition of supporting unlimited asylum. Hitting back at Labour, the PM said the party was on the side of people smugglers and that Starmer was just another lefty lawyer with no plan to tackle illegal immigration. Let's play it.
The Prime Minister says they will detain people who aren't eligible to claim asylum here and then return them. Well, they already tried that under the last legislation. Last year, 18,000 people were deemed ineligible to apply for asylum. That's the easy bit, the talk. But as for the action, Prime Minister, how many of them have actually been returned?
Actually, when I was in Dover yesterday talking to our law enforcement officials, what did they tell me? Precisely because of the law that the Conservative government passed last year, they have now been able to arrest more than double the number of people they did before. 397 in the last 6 months. But stopping the boats, Mr. Speaker, stopping the boats is not just my priority, it is the people's priority. But his position on this is clear. He wanted to, in his words, scrap the Rwanda deal. He voted against measures to deport foreign criminals, Mr. Speaker, and he even argued against deportation flights. Well, and we know why, because on this matter, he talked about his legal background. He's just another lefty lawyer standing in our way.
Right, well, there we go. A bit of Punch and Judy stuff in the Commons earlier, wasn't it? I quite like it when it gets feisty. Joining me now is the chair of Migration Watch, Alp Mehmet. Alp, thank you very much. OK, so is Keir Starmer on the side of people smugglers?
Ask him. I wouldn't go that far, I have to say. On the evidence that he has, by and large, been against the sort of tougher measures that have been proposed over the last few years, yeah, I think you could argue that. He did also sign a letter calling for the stop to deportation of a certain Jamaican criminal, along with some lovies, some other lawyers, other left-wing lawyers, and indeed some quite well-known people who well, shall we say, appear on TV from time to time and the movies.
Yes, no, indeed. I mean, obviously Gary Lineker is also in hot water at the minute out for saying that basically what the government wants to do is akin to, or the language the government is using is akin to that used by Hitler in Germany under the Nazis. I mean, what do you make of that? Because a lot of people are saying he should be sacked.
That's for the BBC. But look, I listened to the interview you did earlier with the Rabbi Remain, and I thought he came out with a very sensible line. He wouldn't really condone that sort of description, and certainly it in a way denigrates, belittles the scale of what happened and the evil that was perpetrated in the 30s. And I would take issue with Gary Lineker on that. But if he wants to say daft things, frankly, then that's a matter for him. And if he says it in a way that contravenes whatever his employment restrictions, whatever his employment rules are, well, that's for the BBC to sort out. As far as I'm concerned, he should stick to football there.
Well, stick to football, yes. But Al, when it comes to what the Conservative Party are trying to do, some people would say, well, actually, they are trying to preserve life. They've given the French rather a lot of money to try to stop people making a journey across the Channel, and that is a way of stopping them essentially drowning in the busiest shipping lane in the world. What would Labour try to do? I know they're saying they want to tackle the people smuggling gangs. Yeah, all right, fine. But is that their only solution?
Well, the Labour Party seems to say, let's tackle the gangs and get the backlog down. And that, miraculously, is going to stop people from coming over. It won't. I mean, it's a nonsense, frankly. It's a vacuous, empty policy. And I'm afraid that if they're serious about stopping this, and I'd like to believe that we're all serious about stopping what's going on. Of course we want to stop it because it's going to mean more loss of life. It's very costly. And most of the people in this country are absolutely fed to the back teeth, really, with it all going on and escalating in the way that it has. And it is escalating. On present trends, we're really looking at double the number that came in last year. Whether it is that number at the end, I don't know. But certainly it's something that's going to go on growing and growing. The costs will grow and more people will die.
OK, look, Alp, thank you very, very much. That is Alp Mehmet there, who is the chair of Migration Watch, reacting to a few things that are wrapped up now in this great big immigration debate. So the illegal immigration bill, what Rishi Sunak essentially wants to be able to do is to deport more people and put a cap on the number of refugees. Keir Starmer is saying, well, this won't work. It is fascinating, though, the position that we're in politically here, because Rishi Sunak obviously was stood on a plinth yesterday that said stop the boats. So he is in a tricky situation, clearly, if the boats don't stop. The Labour Party also now, potentially, some could argue, would do everything that they could to make sure the boats don't stop, so that Rishi Sunak breaks his promise there and the British public see that. So questions to be had over whether or not they would act in the best interest of the people, but there we have it. Rishi Sunak said yesterday that there wasn't one silver bullet to solve the migrant crisis, and former Home Secretary Priti Patel agrees with the Prime Minister. Shock horror.
The legislation has only just been published. It's got to go through Parliament. We all want this to work. I think it's important to recognise that obviously it builds upon the previous work that's been put in place. But we do have legislation that only came in this year. It still needs to be implemented, and there's a very, very important message there. Implement what we've got and build upon that going forward. And, you know, look at the work that was done through the new plan for immigration. There's no one single solution to this at all. This needs end-to-end reform.
Yeah, indeed. And Rishi Sunak's going to have to brace himself for the inevitable legal storm that is heading his way from the quote-unquote lefty lawyers, which is a phrase he used to quote Keir Starmer as earlier on. And our very own Tom Harwell was magnificent yesterday, teaching the likes of Robert Peston how it is done by asking a very short and concise and clear question to the Prime Minister, such as, are you up for the fight? Rishi Sunak said he was up for the fight. Tom Harwell asked him, well, what's plan B if this doesn't work? Rishi Sunak quite concisely said that basically there is no plan B, this is going to work. Is it legal? Is it not legal? Rishi Sunak does believe that it is. And I wonder whether or not, if Rishi Sunak does really genuinely believe in this policy, which I think he appears to do, he's being pretty full frontal about it, and Suella Braverman, our Home Secretary, do genuinely believe that they want to stop the boats, maybe now we will see what can be done with proper political will, but certainly they will have made a rod for their own backs if it doesn't work. But as promised, BBC presenter Gary Lineker has been heavily criticised for comparing the Tories' plans to tackle the migrant crisis to Nazi Germany. Lineker responded to a video from Suella Braverman where she outlined the government's illegal migrant bill by saying it was, quote, beyond awful. When he was pulled up on his comment, Lineker replied, "There is no huge influx." I'm just going to work through this, actually. There is a huge influx, isn't there, because we're seeing record numbers, so there's that. So he says there's no huge influx. He says, we take far fewer refugees than other major European countries. A lot of other European countries are much bigger than us, Gary, but there we go. This is just an immeasurably cruel policy directed at the most vulnerable people. OK, obviously part of the policy is to try to stop people drowning in the Channel and then coming over here and not being able to live, but there we go. Not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 30s. Which, of course, was a Nazi regime that led to the Holocaust, which is clearly not what's happening. Anyway, a source says that BBC bosses are having a frank conversation with Lineker today, who just a few months ago was found to have breached BBC impartiality rules following a comment he made about the Conservatives. Lineker is the BBC's best paid presenter. It was revealed last July that he was on £1.35 million a year. Does anyone else think it's fascinating that Jeremy Clarkson can get biffed from Top Gear for, I don't know what, just being Jeremy Clarkson, really? Gary Lineker can come out and say all this stuff and he keeps his job. But I asked the great British public to find out if Lineker should keep his position. I would have stayed out longer, but it was snowing. Do you think that Gary Lineker on the BBC should be allowed to express political views?
No, not really.
Why not? Why not?
Because he's sports only.
In my opinion, he was right.
You think he was right?
Yes, I think he was right.
I
think the immigration policy is horrible, and I think we're less of a country by supporting something like this.
That's obviously fair enough, completely.
Yeah.
The question mark is over whether or not Gary Lineker as a BBC employee should
Doesn't
be
bother me. I
tweeted.
think people should say their opinions more, and I'm sick of people not saying what they really think.
Views on it, pretty much where the BBC stand with it. You know, like, I don't think he should be doing what he's doing. Yeah, he should be sacked.
OK, there we go, a range of views. With me now is Andrew Allison, who's the Chief Executive of the Freedom Foundation, and Rebecca Ryan, who's the Campaign Director of Defund the BBC. There we go, good stuff. OK, well, I will start with you, Andrew. Do you think that Gary Lineker should be sacked?
There's two things at play here. Gary Lineker is a freelance journalist working for the BBC, and I think the BBC should be impartial. So the fact that the BBC are saying that they're going to have quite a frank word with him, but they've said that in the past, of course, is entirely for the BBC. What I'm more interested in is the freedom of speech of someone who is a free citizen. Now, you mentioned Jeremy Clarkson. The last time we spoke was just before Christmas. It was after Jeremy Clarkson's Sun column attacking Meghan Markle. And all of us agreed that he shouldn't be cancelled. But I don't think that Gary Lineker should be cancelled. But at the same time, I don't think he should be making comments that he is making as an employee or a freelance journalist working for the BBC. Bearing in mind, he's worked for the BBC since 1999, and he's had lots of black marks against his name in the meantime.
Yeah, I think we can all get behind the free speech thing. I mean, my job would literally not exist if I wasn't allowed to have freedom of speech, and GBNews does that.
Nor would mine.
Yeah, GBNews does that exceptionally well, of course, and in a rather unusual way in the British media landscape. And I'm completely here for that. But there is, as I'm sure, no doubt, Rebecca, that you're going to bring up now, added complications for Gary Lineker, such as his actual employment at the actual BBC, which does have rather strict impartiality guidelines, which, as far as I can see, he's broken.
Absolutely. So the thing about the BBC and how it is funded is that in its charter, it's obliged to be impartial. It's obliged to represent the people of the UK, and it's obliged to also unify the different people of the UK. And what Gary Lineker does as the highest paid employee, whatever the terms of his contract are, in receipt of essentially what is taxpayers' money. He's breaching those obligations, and he's forcing the BBC to be in breach of those obligations. Now, if they want to keep Gary Lineker, then that's absolutely fine. I agree with free speech, but I also agree with getting rid of the TV license. So, keep Gary Lineker all you like, but let's get rid of the TV license because they are in breach of their obligations by keeping him.
OK. I mean, I'll just throw it back over to you, Andrew. As far as I can tell, the BBC's guideline states that employees should avoid virtue signalling and adds, remember that your personal brand on social media is always secondary to your responsibility to the BBC. So is your issue more with the fact that you don't think the BBC should be able to curtail people's freedom of speech? But presumably Gary Lineker, to the tune of £1 million a year, has signed a contract with them, which would imply that now he's in breach of that contract.
Rebecca and I know each other well, and Rebecca's responsible for defund the BBC. I run an Axe the TV tax campaign. We're both in complete agreement on that. If anything, it's actually a reason why the BBC licence fee should be completely scrapped. I mean, we're in a position where viewers who want to watch GB News all day have to pay the BBC for the privilege of it. So
we pay his wages, don't we? Yeah.
Well, we do pay his wages, and that is the problem. And the BBC do have a problem with impartiality right across the board. But it's not just with Gary Lineker, is it? But I really wish that Gary Lineker would do what Andrew Marr did. And he said he felt quite liberated after leaving the BBC. He's now working for the New Statesman. I've read a number of his columns, and he feels quite free to express his views. And I would say to Gary Lineker that I don't think he should be cancelled. I think he should be free to go work for other
broadcasters. But you never see anyone, to be fair, you never see anyone leave the BBC, really, so that they can express more centre-right views in public, do you, then?
Never that. No,
it does seem to imply.
In the case of Andrew Marr, it was more left-wing views. Of course, I do. But Andrew Marr did it the right way. He tried to remain impartial. Whether he succeeded in that in his years at the BBC is another question. But he tried to remain impartial, and then when he wanted to express his views, he's gone and left the BBC. Now, I think that is probably a good thing for Gary Lineker to do. But I'm opposed to cancel culture, Patrick. And I can't.
Well, he's not going to be cancelled, is he? He's not going to be cancelled, is he? I take your point, but he's not going to be cancelled because he works for all of the companies. One thing, Rebecca, that I find remarkable about Gary Lineker, I'm going to exercise my free speech now to strongly imply that potentially, anyway, he is a bit of a hypocrite because he was fine with Qatar and, all of the absolutely abhorrent human rights issues that take place over there. That was all right, presumably got paid quite handsomely for going out there to Qatar. But he does think that the Conservative Party's rhetoric at the moment sounds a bit like Hitler and isn't afraid to tweet that, which, Rebecca, can you just square that circle for me?
I don't think it's possible to square that circle, other than just to say money talks. He's absolutely free to take that money and do what he likes with it. And I agree, free speech is absolutely essential to a free democracy. But whilst you've got this archaic licence fee, they're obliged to be impartial, and they're in breach of that obligation. And therefore, we need to get rid of the TV tax, and then Gary Lineker can say what he likes or go and work for someone where he's able to do that. But at the moment, they are, in hock to the British taxpayer, and as a result of that, they have to abide by this messaging that holds the country together, all the different parts of the country. They're supposed to be representative of all of us. They're supposed to be unifying, not divisive, and they are completely the opposite of that. And their star employee is the one who's heading it up and being the worst, person for doing this, and they need to be called out.
I did enjoy the email that I got in earlier on that said that if Gary Lineker cares this much about it, he could probably house at least 20 Albanian men in his own house, and I think that would be fascinating. Anyway, right, thank you very much, both of you. Great to have you both on the show, as ever. Andrew Allison there, who's the Chief Executive of the Freedom Foundation, and Rebecca Ryan, who's the Campaign Director of Defund the BBC. Now, Ngozi Fulani, remember her? The woman... Yes, Marlene Hadley, in case you're wondering. The woman who was upset at being asked where she really came from at a royal reception. She's back in the news today, and I'm going to tell you why she is still criticising Buckingham Palace again. I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Well, welcome back. There is loads more still to come between now and 6 o'clock. Have scientists finally found the cure for my man boobs and love handles? We will tell you all about a weight loss jab that's coming to a high street and potentially my own arm. And find out why some Eurovision fans didn't get a ticket. Those are not Eurovision fans, they're just fat people walking around the street. And they went on sale yesterday, but they're still out of pockets apparently. But first, we have loads more from Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. The top story on GB News today, the Prime Minister has accused the Labour leader of being on the side of the people smugglers as the pair went head-to-head in the House of Commons today over the new illegal migration bill. Rishi Sunak defended the legislation, which will remove those who enter the UK illegally and ban them from seeking asylum in future. Sir Keir Starmer, though, cast doubt on the plans, saying attempts to tackle the number of channel crossings in the last decade have failed and numbers have in fact gone up. He says the Conservatives have lost control of the UK's borders, which Mr Sunak denied, counter-accusing the opposition of supporting unlimited asylum.
The honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
Mr Speaker, when I was in charge of prosecutions, I extradited countless rapists. And the conviction rate for people smuggling was twice what it is today. I voted against his legislation last time because I said it wouldn't work. Since it became law, the numbers have gone up. He's proved me right.
And in other news today, the reward for information about the shooting of a police officer in Northern Ireland last month has been increased to £150,000. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot up to 10 times at a sports centre in Omagh after coaching his children's football match. He remains in a critical but stable condition in hospital. And the Duke of Sussex will be at the centre of a High Court trial against Mirror Group newspapers over phone hacking allegations. He's one of several high-profile celebrities bringing action against the publisher. The tabloid newspapers is contesting the claims, arguing that some of the claims have been brought too late. Nevertheless, the trial will begin on the 9th of May and is expected to last around 7 weeks. You're up to date. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
Yes, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I've got loads more coming your way, but a very serious story first. It is the second day of the trial of the man accused of murdering 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Olivia was shot inside her home in Liverpool last August, and Thomas Cashman is charged with murder. GB News' North West reporter Sophie Reaper has been at Manchester Crown Court for us.
Yesterday, when we heard the prosecution's opening statement, it was all about what they alleged. However, today it's been about evidence, things that we know as facts. So this afternoon, members of the jury have been shown CCTV footage and various virtual maps, which depicts several different journeys taken by Thomas Cashman on the 22nd of August last year. Now, we reached a rather significant moment on the timeline at around 9 p.m. because before that, it's an established fact that the person we've been seeing is Thomas Cashman. However, after that point, he disputes being the man that we've been seeing in the CCTV footage and virtual maps. So it becomes that the man is allegedly Thomas Cashman. Finally, the jury were also taken all the way through the movements of the gunman that the prosecution alleged to be Thomas Cashman before, during and even after the gun attack that would ultimately lead to the death of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Now, court has concluded for the day, but it's scheduled to resume tomorrow morning here at Manchester Crown Court.
Yes, indeed. Look, a deeply tragic story, that, and we will bring you more updates as and when we get it. That was Sophie Reaper there outside Manchester Crown Court. Right, we're moving away from that now. I'm going to delve into the terrifying world of my inbox. A lovely message here from Julia. Patrick, you are a total joy today and on top form. Thank you very much, Julia. She says, I am cold, skint and fed up. But as always, you made me laugh out loud. Thank you so much. Julia, yeah, great. I mean, I'm quite cold and skint as well, but this gets me out of the house, at least, doesn't it? Loads of you have been getting in touch, though, with your views on Gary Lineker comparing the UK's asylum policy to the actual Nazis and whether or not he should continue to have a role at the BBC. Nigel says, sack him. We, the people, do not pay our TV licence and contribute to his extortionate salary to listen to him virtue signalling. He should confine his comments to football. Indeed. Paul says, ask dear Gary if he would oppose planning for 10 new migrant homes to be built on his estate, in his garden. It's big enough. Look, I know that people will be saying, well, Gary Lineker has taken in refugees. Yeah, fair enough. Look, I've not taken a refugee. It's fair enough. Gary Lineker has done a couple of those things. But, actually, let's be honest with you, did he take in, I don't know, 20 Albanian men? Or has he decided that he's going to build a migrant camp in his back garden? I mean, a lot of people outside of the multimillionaire Gary Lineker's no doubt gated community probably are feeling the pinch of the migrant crisis a little bit more than Gary himself. Karen says, I'm sick to the back teeth of these rich people, here we go, in their ivory towers complaining about the migrant situation. You know what gets me, Karen, is the idea now, if someone can make the leap, right, from a government policy that is designed to stop costing the British taxpayer £7 million and the rest every single day, and potentially allow people into the country who, in some cases, not all, but in some cases, have gone on to commit heinous crimes, OK? If the leap can be made that wanting to do that makes you a Nazi, what does Gary Lineker really think about all of the people who agree that we should be clamping down on illegal immigration in the Channel? Because presumably, he thinks that we're all far right, does he? I find that a little bit offensive, to say the least. Got time for one more before we move on to a different topic. Chris says this is a clear breach of impartiality and he must be sacked. Yes, on this again, Chris, I will say, look, you know, I'm a massive believer in free speech and I can literally sit here every single day and dish it out. And I love that. But Gary Lineker does work at the BBC. We do pay his wages and there are impartiality rules there. Whether or not they should exist is a different question. Has he broken the ones that do exist? That is a matter, clearly, for the BBC, who have released an interesting article on their website outlining exactly why Gary Lineker's comments are a problem. It'll be fascinating to see whether or not they've been able to actually contact him. But now, could a new wonder drug be the answer to all of our fat loss problems? That's right. Wave goodbye to your bingo wings and your beer belly and all of this stuff, because Wegovy drug is to be offered to tens of thousands of obese people, as a close-up of my belly there on the screens. In NHS England's new policy, it works by suppressing our appetite, good luck with that, leading to reduced hunger and calorie intake. So is this a quick fix that many people have hoped for? With me now is wellness expert, it's Monica Linford. Monica, thank you very much. Should fatties like me get a jab?
Well, Patrick, I'm not a fan of quick fix. I have great empathy for anyone struggling with weight. It's a real misery when you're trying to lose weight and nothing seems to be working. I think always the integrative approach. So yes, something to help someone who really needs to have some encouragement that it's working, but education in nutrition is paramount. And calorie counting, my concern is with calorie counting, is that not all calories are equal. So I've had clients who have counted, I can have this, but there's no nutritional value in that. So it's looking at what their nutritional needs are and filling that gap. So sometimes it can help, but my concern is it's not a long-term solution. And there are side effects. The researchers show, the clinical trials showed real gastrointestinal issues, and and extreme risk is thyroid cancer. So, and also the participants in the trial, about 232 participants, a year later, the follow-up showed they'd regained their weight. So
it's a quick fix that might not work.
So
Monica,
if they're educated, those who are going through the trial, they really do need to be educated side by side with the drug. But I'm concerned that this will affect other organ systems in the long term. So that's from a wellness perspective, that's my concern.
Monica, I heard a lot there, and a lot of it made sense. At no point did I hear you utter the words, Patrick, don't worry, you're not fat. And but there we go. That's all right. That's fine. No. It feels a bit forced now, Monica. It feels a bit forced. But look, I think a lot of people might also be saying, like you've just identified there, the educational things could lead to longer-term health benefits. And also, look, dare I say it, why should the taxpayer pay for people if they have got themselves into a certain situation, assuming that there's no medical issues other than the fact that they've just eaten too much? Why should the taxpayer be paying for them to get an injection that might help reduce their appetite? Well, maybe they could do it themselves.
Well, that's true, because another concern is similar to heart surgery. I can't remember, this statistic was many years ago, but I remember a cardiologist saying in an interview that 96% of his patients after cardiac surgery didn't change their diet. They just relied on the medication. And so this again is how motivated are people to really change their habits. And looking at the foods that harm and the foods that heal. And there are, processed food is the first thing. So even if they started to scratch cook, 3 or 4 times a week, actually buying real food and cooking it at home. But it seems we've got into such a habit of fast food, quick fixes. And I'm just wondering, how do we, again, it's education. It's education in helping people understand that there are consequences long-term to certain foods. Exactly. And we are what we eat. And they say, 80% of fitness is what we put in our mouth.
Grief. I mean, if we are what we eat, I am some fried chicken from M&S. So there we go. Monica, thank you very much. Monica Linford, who is a wellness expert who no doubt I could employ. Right. Still to come. Ngozi Fulani has had more harsh words for Buckingham Palace. Stand by for an interview with her. I'm Patrick Christys, this is GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Welcome back. Ngozi Fulani, the woman who said she was the victim of institutional racism from one of the late Queen's ladies-in-waiting, is back in the news today, you lucky people, because Fulani says that she's temporarily resigned as chief executive of Sister Space, which is a controversial charity, to say the least, which she founded, as she criticised Buckingham Palace for not tackling the abuse she suffered in the wake of the incident. Fulani was asked where she really came from and, I mean, remarkably as well, asked what part of Africa do you come from by Lady Susan Hussey at a Buckingham Palace reception in November. Lady Hussey resigned a few days later. The two of them had a meeting as well, filled, and I'm quoting now, filled with warmth and understanding, and also where Lady Susan Hussey offered her, quote, sincere apologies to Ngozi Fulani. But Buckingham Palace said last night, again, that they were deeply sorry for the incident and apologised for the distress and difficulty it caused Miss Fulani. But that wasn't enough, because this is what Marlene Headley had to say earlier this morning.
Who are they apologising to? If you're sorry, tell me you're sorry. If you're not, it speaks for itself.
I think there's a number of things wrong with that statement, if I'm honest. I think the agreements that they've proposed, that they've met or honoured, are not the agreements that we set out with them. And I think if you're able to make a statement in the middle of the night to the public, why can't you give the apology that you disagree with?
Yeah, I don't see what is so hard to say, I'm sorry. You sent me an invitation, so you know how to find me, you know how to say sorry. If you're sorry, then say sorry. If you're not, I get it. But when you make this apology to everybody, I don't know who you're apologising to.
Is this a joke? Are we being trolled? I know GB News' royal correspondent Cameron Walker is back with me. I just don't understand this, Cameron. So, Lady Susan Hussey offered her sincere apologies to Ngozi Fulani. The royal family have apologised. What's happened here now? She thinks they're not sorry.
Yeah, I think most people thought that was drawing a line under it, water under a bridge. However, Ngozi Fulani appeared on Good Morning Britain this morning. And essentially, because she was coming on, they reached out to Buckingham Palace for a statement, and that is the statement which Ngozi Fulani appears to be taking offence to, some of which you read out in your introduction as well. The crux of it was that it was a right of reply. They reiterated the apologies which had been given to Ngozi Fulani in person at this meeting at Buckingham Palace in December with Lady Susan Hussey present. I've also been told, from my understanding at least, is that the reason that, well, Ngozi Fulani said during that interview that she was temporarily stepping down as CEO of Sister Space, which is the charity which looks after domestic abuse victims, which she was chief of. The reason she's stepping down is due to the abuse that she claims to have suffered as part having spoken out about the comments which Lady Susan made to her at that particular reception, questioning where she came from.
Obviously nothing to do at all with some of the controversies that might be surrounding the charity itself, yes.
No, well, yes, so that's online, and also threats of violence, etc. Now, from my understanding, Buckingham Palace has helped out with that and very much was trying to reach out to Ngozi Fulani and keep in contact, but has not heard anything from her. So I think perhaps from Buckingham Palace's perspective, they are perhaps slightly taken aback as to why Ngozi is appearing on national television, basically appearing to be giving the same arguments as she gave before the meeting took place in December.
Yes, it is interesting as well. Ngozi Fulani, a.k.a. Marlene Headley, was also there wearing earrings with the map of Africa on, and of course, remarkably, she was asked, what part of Africa do you come from, which she took such offence to by 83-year-old Lady Susan Hussey, who since stepped down from her role. And she said, no doubt Buckingham Palace will be hoping that this is the last we hear of this, but it probably won't be.
I think that is what Buckingham Palace would hope. As you said, the meeting in December was full of warmth and understanding, and at the end of that meeting, a joint statement was issued where they basically said that all apologies have been accepted, water under the bridge. And from my understanding as well, there was an agreement at the end of that meeting which said no more media comments from either side was to be made about this, but then Ngozi has gone on television this morning.
I just don't understand what the outrage is. I just really seriously don't understand what the outrage can possibly be. But anyway, there we go. Cameron, thank you very much. Cameron Walker there, our royal correspondent. Do you think that will be the last that we hear from Marlene Headley? Probably not. Now, though, as we heard yesterday, some 6,000 tickets for the Eurovision Song Contest in May went on sale. Superfan demand on website Ticketmaster was so high that the website crashed, just like when Taylor Swift tickets went on sale. Oh, just another concert I just narrowly missed out on going to anyway. The final, which is taking place in Liverpool on behalf of Ukraine, last year's winners, sold out in 36 minutes, leaving thousands unfortunately disappointed. But fraud experts have warned that with so much demand, there is potential for criminals to take advantage of fans with fraudulent websites and fake tickets at an event once it's sold out. Anyway, now there's also concerns that hotels on Booking.com have been targeted by cyber attacks, putting fans' data security at risk. Someone who was approached by a scammer is Eurovision fan. It is Louise Malley, and she joins me now. Louise, yes, thank you very much. So, first and foremost, you are a massive Eurovision fan. What do you like about it so much?
What I love about it is just the atmosphere, the music. I listen to pretty much every song that gets released months in advance. The hype, the parties, the get-together, and the fact it was coming to the UK. And
Sorry, Louise, I think you were interrupted by Eurovision there for a second, so just carry on. Apologies about that. You were saying you loved it so much because, presumably, you loved that, because that was one of the songs from Eurovision, I believe.
I'm happy to be interrupted by a Eurovision song. So, no, absolutely. So, just because the last time we won, I think I was 6 years old, so this would have been my first time to actually potentially go to a concert in the UK. I know we didn't win last year, but the fact it's been held here in Liverpool, which again is really close to where I live. I was just so excited by the concept of trying to get tickets, and I was one of the many thousand that was unable to due to the just vast volume of people trying to get tickets at the time.
Well, yes, unfortunately, that is the case. But I understand that you were... So there's some story here that you were approached by scammers or something like that. Is that right? Just talk me through it.
Yeah, so I joined a Facebook group sort of a week or two before, which is a bit of a community of support of trying to get tickets, talking about Eurovision, exchanging of hotels, a really nice group actually, and it is a private group. And as soon as the tickets went live, obviously people were messaging on Facebook on people's successes and also people not getting through. And as quickly as all those tickets got sold out, people were posting their disappointments of not getting tickets, and people were commenting. And I made a comment just saying, yeah, I unfortunately didn't get tickets. And by just me making that comment on someone else's post, the scammers who'd obviously joined these groups as well, contacted me directly onto Facebook and saying, oh, I've got a couple of spare tickets. Are you interested? And at the time, your emotions are running really high. You're thinking, oh my gosh, this is an opportunity. And I wasn't thinking complete with my head at the time. So I started messaging back. And I must admit, quite soon on, something didn't feel right. The fact straight away that the person mentioned they were going to sell them at the face value of the ticket. And I'd already seen resale prices significantly higher, in the thousands, and they were willing to sell 2 tickets for the grand final for £100, which I think is actually lower than the face value of the cheapest ticket. So I did actually continue having this conversation with the person just to see where it was, because I still thought or had a bit of hope maybe it was real and genuine, and asked why they were selling, what was their motive. Gave quite a genuine reason, said their husband had bought tickets and they didn't realise, and they both sort of double booked. But then I started to quiz them why they weren't selling through a genuine reseller site. So going back onto Ticketmaster, and I wasn't getting a straight answer. So then that was when I really wanted to dig deeper and find out if this person was a scammer. So I kept messaging to find out by asking questions, continuously asking questions about why they're not reselling them, why they're only selling them at the price that they are. And the fact that when I started to question, they got quite aggressive in saying, I thought you were okay to pay. Why aren't you paying me? And straight away, the alarm bells rang. And luckily, I did dodge this scenario.
Well, I hope that your story can act as some quite useful advice to people, actually, because these people do prey on individuals, don't they? You've got a deep passion to go to me. I do hope that you managed to get yourself there, though, and, yeah, good luck, and fingers crossed we can actually win it this time. I'm reliably informed that we can reveal the song tomorrow, so I am sure we will all be glued to that. Oh, you're shaking your head at me. What's wrong? Oh, you can't wait. Oh, you can't wait. I see. OK, right, good stuff. Louise, we'll have to get her back on when Eurovision actually happens. Anyway, right, Louise Malley there. Good stuff. That was a Eurovision superfan. OK, so I'm joined now by Michelle Dewberry, who's coming up next with Jubes & Co. There you go. What have we got coming up? You're not going to tell me again?
No, I will tell you. Oh. Yes, but I will also say I've never watched. Is it an episode? A part of
Eurovision?
What do you call them?
It's a show. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. It's not for me. Just full of glitter.
Yeah, it's not for me either. Eurovision is not for me. Anyway, what is for me? 1930s Germany. Really, that is the comparisons that we've been given today when it comes to the Sunak plan. It's all bonkers. Ngazi, Falurli,
Marlene, yes.
Marlene. I mean.
OK. All right. I'm being shouted at. We've got to go. Jubes & Co. coming up your way next. Peace out, people.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, 6 o'clock, I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, 1930s Britain. Is that what we're living in? Well, according to Saint Gary Lineker, apparently so. What do you make to him, by the way? Is it time that he gets the boot from the BBC for expressing one too many opinions, which, quite frankly, are nowhere near being impartial? Childcare? Is it time that everyone gets free access to it to get more women into work? It is, after all, International Women's Day. Do you care about that? I've got to be honest, I don't really.